Well, welcome back. Sorry about that. Sometimes being out in the bush means that we do get a few little gremlins, so we're trying to vanquish them as quick as possible and make sure that we don't have any issues. But you can see that we have the most epic scene playing out in front of us. The beautiful, beautiful sunrise. Lions are up, and the reason why is that they were watching a hippo that is walking around. Now, I think this hippo wanted to come into this small little waterhole that is here, but unfortunately for him, there are lions and a vehicle, and so he's decided, well, I'm going to rather just walk around it at this stage. And you can see all the lions are kind of quite interested in this hippo. Now, these are mostly young lions that we've got here. They're all sub-adults, and so I think it's more just intrigue than anything else. There you'll see the hippo will come around the bend shortly. It should come into frame, and there we go. There it is. And so this is far too large for these guys to take on, but when you're a cub or you're a young animal, you know, curiosity gets the best of you, and you will often kind of go and look at rather large things. But how cool is that? So yesterday we had lion and elephant. Today we've got lion and hippo. Mara is always a two-shot dream when it comes to trying to see animals with other animals in the frame. But there goes our hippo. He's going to waddle off down the hill and probably carry on towards the drainage line that flows not too far away from us at the base of the escarpment and go and try and seek some sort of sanctity and shelter there. Now, earlier I said there were 5. There are actually 6 here. Now, one has gotten up and moved off. She went kind of towards the tree that I was talking about and then disappeared over the edge down towards the sort of drainage line. So you'll see this is the tree that I'm talking about. This is the one that they can sometimes climb into and sit up in there. But she's just kind of gone over that lip to the right of the tree. So I don't know where she went off. She was one of the adults that was there. Somewhere in that general vicinity is where she dropped down and into that forested area below. Now, I wouldn't be surprised that the rest of the pride follows at some point, given that it is going to get warm. Like I say, there is quite a lot of sun that should be coming up shortly, and you'll find that these guys might then head off in towards that forested section. Now, what it looks like that's left here is all sub-adults bar the one right in the middle there. So you see the one that's kind of sitting facing us and not facing away. That looks to be more of an older individual. That's one of the little cubs that we've got on the left. Looks like maybe a little young boy that's starting to develop a little mohawk, and then you've got to the right of that a little female and then a bigger female that's lying in amongst them. So I would imagine that we've got 2 adult females and then the rest are these sub-adults, and we know that the Orla pride is much bigger than this, and so I wonder where the rest are. Maybe the rest are down below where that female headed. She might have gone down to where the rest of the pride is, and these guys have just stayed behind. I'm pretty sure they came for water already and have already drank, and they've just lay up after drinking, and then they're going to basically come back and try and go and find some sort of shelter behind me. Like I said, this area behind here is perfect for them to be able to go and rest up for the day and to get out of the heat of the day, and then they can kind of ambush from there or come out later in the evenings when they want to hunt. Now, what's also interesting is while we've been sitting here is that we've been hearing lions roaring not too far away. I surmise that it's the 2 males we saw yesterday, the 2 Kichwa boys, because it's coming from a similar area to where we had them. Sounds like towards the marsh kind of section, and so I wonder if they're somewhere in that area where that hippo is kind of waddling off to, but further beyond where those trees are is where there's lions also roaring. So I wonder if maybe they're around, that this is also why these females are all getting up and moving towards the sort of escarpment area. Now, Anna Marie, you say another Mara classic sunrise. I know they are quite spectacular, aren't they? It's something that is very special about this part of the world, is that you get these incredible sunrises, and we're lucky that we kind of start our day where we do, because we start our day up on the escarpment and we slowly kind of come down. We often get these incredible vistas that sort of roll down below us as the plains stretch out, and then the sun comes up on the other side. So you get these incredible sunrises out here. It's very, very special to spend time out, and when you've got, well, a little group of lions and a hippo strolling by, it makes it that much better. Right. Now, I'm going to sit with our lions. They're slowly waking up a little bit, and hopefully they're going to climb that tree that I was talking about. And so while we wait for that, let's send you across to Jamie, who's looking apparently at all the smaller things on Bushwalk.
The smaller things that are a sign that it rained last night. So I've been absolutely mesmerized by the sight of these termite alates coming out of holes in the ground and taking off, ready to start a new life. The vast majority of them, of course, will not start a new life. The vast majority of them will, in fact, be eaten. But every now and again, 2 of them happen to find each other. They find love in this great, wide, open space. I don't know if love is the right word. They find some pheromones. They find pheromones, which is, one might say, essentially the same thing, and they create themselves a brand new termite colony. Now, these are tiny termites. These are microtermes. There's a lot of different termite species, and I confess to not knowing all of them. But these are the much, much smaller termite species that, instead of constructing those enormous termite mounds that we're accustomed to seeing and that we associate mainly with termites, have little holes underneath, or tunnels underneath the surface of the soil. Sometimes I almost wish I could, I don't know, get a cross-section of what it looks like underground and the world that we walk on top of. It would be fascinating to know. Isn't it amazing how one termite queen can produce offspring of so many different varieties? She's got her workers and her soldiers, and then at this time of year, she produces these reproductive alates that have wings, and of course most termites are unable to reproduce, but these ones are. They can reproduce, and that is their sole purpose, and she produces them in these massive, massive numbers, because of course most of them shall not succeed. They're a vital food source for lots out here, whether we're talking about birds or predators. Hosanna actually was trying to hunt impala, so he was looking for something a little bit larger than termites. But if he found some alates all gathered together, he would actually stop and he would lick up the termites, because it's such an important source of protein that cannot go to waste. So most of them do not succeed. Most of them, within our camp this morning, we were wiping ant alates off our cups of tea before we were able to drink them. It's just that time of year. I just find it astounding, the sheer numbers that one colony is able to produce. We're going to be leaping around very shortly, Seb, with alates down our shirts and in our hair and our ears. Okay, well, while we eagerly anticipate that eventuality, Brent apparently has left the hyenas. Let's see where he's off to next.
Well, the hyenas left me. The adults moved away from the den, probably to go sleep somewhere, and the cubs went into the hole. So we are now just going to have a quick check down to the east slightly. Very beautiful this morning, and the sun rising and all the little termite alates flittering about. There we go. Craig says you can see where they're coming out from. You can just see there, look at that. Isn't that pretty? I think it's pretty enough to warrant a sneeze. It is absolutely stunning. Achoo! Achoo! Allergies this morning. So problematic. Isn't that beautiful? And it's always... Giraffe Girl says, why am I itchy? I don't know, because termite alates don't make you itchy, Giraffe Girl. I was hoping we might get a whole bunch of bird species taking advantage of the alates, but it doesn't look to be. I think there are probably so many emergences happening at the moment that they're probably very full, or sitting on another emergence at a different hole with all the alates coming out. Let's have a closer look now. Aegis would like to know if I ever eaten termites. Many, Aegis, many. And what do they taste like? They taste a little bit like butter. I'm just having a look here. These are tiny ones. Trying to see. They're definitely emerging from around here somewhere. Let's go have a look. Oh, nearly lost my mic pack. Now, of course, you've got lots of different types of termites. And there are tiny little holes here. Tiny, tiny, tiny little holes. But speaking about things tiny, Trishala has found the tiniest of the largest animal.
Good morning, good morning. I'm so excited to be able to start this morning with this tiniest little Ellie I've ever seen. My gosh, I reckon just a few weeks old. Beautiful, beautiful little Ellie. It's tiny if you look at him or her in comparison to Mum. Very, very small. Oh, I hope that he or she feeds a little and we can see that cuteness as well. Isn't this just, oh, cuteness overload. Oh, just take that in. Tiny. I mean, he and she still fits underneath the mum. I didn't get what Jessica had said there. Can you please repeat for me? That is absolutely too sweet, Jessica. I couldn't agree with you more. This is the tiniest little Ellie I've ever seen. It's in a little herd with Mum, of course. Just look at that. Look at the size comparison. Oh, are we looking for a little drink? Mrs. Lapwing says it's baby season. I have to agree with you. I've seen little Ellies out, but this is still the tiniest one I've seen. There haven't been the little impala lambs. It really is baby season. Well, you know, that is what summer is for. There he goes having a drink. Actually, I don't know if it's a he or she. It's very hard to tell, to tell when they're that tiny. But how sweet is that? Look at how the position of the trunk gets out the way so that he or she can drink properly. Oh, isn't that sweet? Jocelyn would like to know if the hole in the elephant's ears are in the front or the back. They're in the front, just like ours. Because the way that an ear works is that they need to channel or funnel through sound. It's much like a satellite dish. It wouldn't really make sense for it to be in the back. So it's in the front so that it has that dome-like shape in order to channel all the sound through. That's why they have incredible hearing. This is a really nice morning sighting. I had a feeling that these Ellies would be around. And I haven't said to anyone, how do we feel about Ellies today? Because I think I'm going to find some. It really feels gentle after last night's storm and ominous atmosphere. This is just nice and calming. See, baby's still tucked underneath. While I spend some more time watching this little puppet. Oh, did you get a little scared? Well, while we watch this little guy for a little bit, let me send you over to Tristan with his lions.
Always highly entertaining to watch little baby Ellies when they're in moods like that, when they're playing and falling over themselves. They got to be one of the cutest animals ever. So Trishala is being spoiled this morning, and it's nice to actually hear that she's out and about and with Ellies. Obviously the trainees have been doing lots and lots of work, and so it's nice to see them actually being out and being live for some time. It's always good to get some time under the belt. But as you can see, we've changed position with our lions at the moment. We're sitting in a slightly different angle. We're now below them. And the reason is that we wanted to see their faces, really. So we had some beautiful shots of the sun rising with them kind of facing it. But we wanted to see their big ears and big eyes when they're at this age. It's always quite funny to see, these kind of younger animals. It's much like Tumbe in many respects, is that, when they're a little bit younger, their ears and their sort of body shape seems awfully awkward. It's kind of, they haven't grown really into anything. In saying that, the Mara lions do have what I find slightly bigger ears than what we see down in Djuma. It seems as though their ears are slightly kind of more pronounced, if that's the word for it, and it allows, you just get a different kind of feel in terms of their ears than what you get from the Djuma ones. James often comments that he reckons that the lions in the Mara have more boxy ears, whereas the ones in Djuma are a little bit more rounded. I'm not sure if, I suppose maybe it's correct, but these guys have certainly got big ears for their age, and they are using them quite intently at the moment. They're sort of listening all over the place, just trying to figure out what's going on around them. They've been quite sort of alert is probably the right word for it, and I'm not sure why. We can't see anything. The problem with where we are at the moment is it's quite tricky to actually spot anything from where we are. You can't really see too much because you're in this kind of little bowl. So you can see nicely down towards the sort of Mara River, but anything behind them or up on the slope is a little bit trickier to see, and so we've been struggling to see what they've been seeing. But that's a very spotty individual, isn't it? Look at all those spots. So if you didn't think lion had spots, well, you can see this one is as spotty as there ever was. It's very, very cool. I always like when the lions have these kind of things. Right, well, our lions are looking around. They're checking about. I wonder if they're potentially going to go and look around for a meal, but it sounds like Jamie's found a different type of predator that has already found a meal of its own.
This is very, very cool. Spotted by Seb. We were talking about the fact that alates are such an important food source for the different animals. Is it eating, Seb, or was it?
I think it is.
I think it is too. So a little bit earlier, the spider was actually wrapping the termite alate in silk, kind of like the baggage wrap at an airport. Now it's gathered it up in its jaws, its mandibles. Now is taking it where exactly? I don't know. I think it's eating. Sucking out the juicy insides of the termite alate. So obviously insects have hemicels rather than sort of tissue and blood vessels. They have a hemicel, which is sort of an open blood cavity. So it's much easier for something like a spider to consume prey like this, because it basically just has to bite in and suck up through it, almost as if it's sucking through a straw, which is a disgusting thought, but still equally fascinating. It's definitely feeding. That is so cool. Crystal, I'm not 100% sure. I think they're daddy long-legged spiders. They look like daddy long-legged spiders, but there's something about the white on the edge of the legs that I'm not 100% convinced by. The famous story about daddy long-legs, of course, is that they have enough venom to kill a human, but their jaws are too small to pierce the skin. That, of course, is absolute nonsense. Total nonsense. Sorry, I just heard a noise. Look, yeah. Oh, Hosana, where are you? What are you doing? These tracks are quite fresh. They're somewhere around here. Don't worry. Seb, if he comes, I'm between you and him. The spider's awesome. We just want to show you what it is he's feeding on. Well, we did earlier. But just have a look at how beautiful this is. Because it's almost fantasy-like. It's odd how, I was thinking about it earlier, about our human brains. How, when we look up close at a termite alate, most people go, ugh, it's just a bug. It's just an insect. It's not very pleasant looking. But like this, they look absolutely amazing. I mean, I know it's the backlight and the moisture in the air, but it's an interesting thing our brain does. I often wonder if animals ever appreciate the beauty of their surroundings. I don't think they do. I think that is something solely and uniquely human. Looking at the view, taking in something and appreciating it for its value. Probably a luxury of being a human. Luxury of being human. You can afford to look at beauty of this because, well, most of us, fortunately, are lucky enough not to be solely focused on survival. Now, if you would like to describe this fantastical world in one word, you can send it through on #SafariLive on Twitter, just to make sure you're all kept in practice when it comes to doing one-word tweets. One word, one adjective, or I suppose you could go with a noun or a verb, but I'm not quite sure how that would work, to describe this sighting. Snazzy says it feels like you should make a wish. I know, it's definitely... I mean, we've gone from the macabre, with a spider sucking out termite juice, to the beautiful. Snazzy, what would you wish for? Or is that too complex and personal a question? What would I wish for? Definitely too complex and personal question. Do they only grant one? Or do they grant one wish per alate? Because in that case, we're in the gold. We're good. Just throw it out. I mean, right now I would really like a grapefruit, and there's an alate that's fluttering around my foot. I don't know why grapefruit. It's just what I feel like this morning. I wish for a grapefruit. And I wish for more rain. And I wish for pancakes for breakfast. Oh, Seb, if only wishes were alates. What a world it would be. Hello, Lily, who is 7 years old. Lily says magical. That's a good word, Lily. It is magical, isn't it? It's beyond magical. Okay, well, while you think of your one-word tweet and perhaps secretly think of all the wishes you would make upon an alate instead of a star, let's go to Brent and see what he's found. Something a bit larger, I think.
Well, we've got a hippo. A late morning hippo. Oh, it suddenly realised we're watching it. It started walking down the road to us from quite a distance. Normally they're quite skittish during the daylight hours. It looks to be a male. Suddenly realised that we're here. Now, of course, hippo can be one of the most dangerous animals in the African bush, particularly when they're out of the water like this. And you can see it's coming straight at us. You have to be quite careful with hippos. There we go, he's going to turn off the road. You can see he's been in the wars. Lots of scars from fighting with other hippos. Nancy says it's so weird to see the whole hippo. Well, but it's quite nice to see them out of the water. Even with the rain we had last night, it's not nearly enough for a lot of these hippos to have great spots to lie, so they might cover themselves in mud, find shady spots in the rivers, the dry riverbeds to sleep in. It's amazing if you just sit still and quietly. Hippos disappear very, very quickly when we spot them at this time of the day. And this one's no more than about 25-30 meters from us. would like to know, when will hippos start giving birth? Well, this one never, because it's a boy. But they breed throughout the year. No, there's no set breeding season. So you can see baby hippos at any time. They're sneaking behind us now. Paradise Girl is wondering, can they hear well with those tiny ears? Well, well enough, Paradise Girl, well enough. Let's have a quick look. Where's he gonna go? Looks like he's heading towards the Moati. But let's see what happens when I start the car. I'm pretty sure he might disappear. Okay, see, as soon as we started the car, it picked up his speed a little bit. And it can be incredibly dangerous, particularly on foot, even in a vehicle. I'm going to find a nice shady spot to spend the day. Fancy says his head looks so heavy. Well, Fancy, that's because it is very heavy. All those massive teeth. He seems to know where he's going. Obviously got a spot in mind to spend the day. And so as the hippo disappears, we're going to go keep looking for some lions. And while we do that, we're going to send you all the way back to the Masai Mara, to Tristan, who has already found his lions this morning.
We are still with our lions, and we've actually found more lions. So while we've been sitting here, another 4 have just arrived. You wouldn't say so because they're all kind of scattered about at the moment, but we're still with the one youngster that is posing as beautifully as you could ever imagine, with the backdrop of the Olololo escarpment, which is where I suppose they get their name from. So we're right below our camp at the moment, which is very, very pleasant. It was a nice, easy start to our day, much like yesterday, actually. We just kind of drove down, and we had them all sort of sitting right here. Now, like I say, 4 of them have just arrived, and the 4 that have just arrived are covered in blood and stomach content, so they must have had a good meal somewhere close by. We have heard some Ellies also shouting, so I wonder if maybe the rest of them are still there. The other 2 that, well, of the 4 that arrived, 2 have come towards these youngsters, and another 2 have sat right behind our car. Now, there is one that is coming. You can see how these guys are all looking sort of behind us. There's another one that will join them shortly, so we'll just wait and be patient, and it should kind of pop out quite soon. It looks like there was a young male also with those 4 that arrived, getting quite big, so it'd be nice to kind of see sort of just the layout of the land in terms of who is here at the moment. Bliss, yes, it has happened where prides have merged together. It's very uncommon, but it has happened. Normally, the reason would be if it's maybe a female from one pride and a female from another, and both are struggling a little bit. Sometimes it can be mutually beneficial that they actually join together and are able to then be able to kind of, what would the word be for it, use one another, and then that bond starts to form and you start to see them kind of coming together. So it does happen. I'm trying to think of an example within the sand system that I could use. I'm just trying to think who would probably be the best ones for that. I'm just trying to think now if I can actually think of any of them from the sands. Probably the best sort of example would be from the Southern Pride. So down in around Lion Sands area, there was a female called Floppy Ear, and she joined the Southern Pride from a different pride altogether, and is then managed to actually become sort of the leader within that group, and they are often, the pride follows her around more than anything else. So you know, it can happen, and like I said, it would be in a situation where it would be mutually beneficial to both parties not to fight with one another, but rather to kind of come together in order to sort of find food and protect each other in maybe a time that's quite tricky. But listen, you'll hear every now and then little soft contact calls. Isn't that beautiful? You can see the younger side of these individuals coming out when they do things like that, when they roll around on top of each other and kind of just talk a little bit. Now, it is really very beautiful. We've got the most epic light on these guys at the moment, and they're just standing on the most perfect spots as well. They're kind of sitting on this little ridge, which is allowing us to get these beautiful views. Now you can see that there's the young male I was talking about, that he's just arriving now. He'll come into frame shortly. I stopped now to greet everybody first, and you'll see what I mean about him being dirty with sort of blood and bits all over them. They've obviously killed something fairly reasonable for the four of them all to have fairly full tummies and to have bits all over them. They might have got something quite young, maybe a youngish zebra or something like that. But I was hoping that they were all going to lie one in a row on top of this ridge, and we'd have all these little heads poking out with paws over the top, but they're not quite listened to me today. They've all decided that they're going to do things a little bit differently. Now, it's quite interesting with this pride is when I was here last time, there was a lot of pride, obviously, when we first arrived here in the Mara as a Wild Earth kind of team, was a pride that we followed quite extensively. We spent a large portion of our time with them and kind of following them around during the first sort of migration series that we did. And then, you know, when I arrived here, they were completely non-existent. I actually only saw them once in 4 months of being here. They were, for the most part, out and moving around towards the fringes of the reserve up on the escarpment, and made it very difficult to find them. So it's actually quite interesting to kind of see them. I know that when we first got here, a lot of these sub-adults that we're seeing now and these sort of cubs were all little tiny babies that were born not too far away, and that was the reason why we spent a lot of time with Aurora Pride, is because those little cubs were very small at that time, and it was easy to find these guys. Now that they've gotten a little bit bigger, they tend to be far more mobile and far more kind of adept to moving around, and it makes it a little bit tougher to actually spend time with them consistently. So it's nice to actually finally catch up with them properly. And the last time I saw them was actually on the last day that I left the Mara, and I saw the entire pride cross the road and then move off towards the escarpment, and we had to get down to, we'd been told that Kenya was around, so we were trying to get down to her, so we actually didn't spend much time with them. But it's quite amazing that in 4 months I only saw them properly once, and so now really nice actually to have spent the morning with them a little bit and just kind of get to know each individual, and to be able to start recognizing certain members will be quite nice. We hear them every night. I mean, we're right below the camp. When I say we're right below the camp, if you kind of see where that line is looking, up on that hill over there, so the one behind the furthest line to the left is basically, there's a little kind of ravine or a little gully that runs up into the mountains there. That's basically where our camp is, on top of that hill. So we hear these guys regularly at night. You hear them calling all the time. But because they move around on this escarpment, it's quite tricky to be able to actually find them sometimes, and kind of makes it a little bit harder. But anyway, we'll sit with them a little bit longer. I'm hoping that the rest of the pride comes, because we're still missing a few members, and so while we wait and be patient for them, let's send you back across to Jamie, who's got, well, something that everybody, well, a lot of people like, but is not exactly speedy.
Do you ever get the feeling that you're just being watched? Because I certainly do. Oh, absolutely awesome. I'm standing over Seb's shoulder so I can see what it is he's filming, because he's just got the most extraordinary shot of this giant land snail, also known, if Kirsty is directing, as a lion Jan snail. And she never realizes when she does that. So yet another sign of a post-rain. Isn't this awesome? This is why we love bushwalk at this time of year. Not that we don't love bushwalk at other times of the year, but at this time of year, my goodness, are there amazing things for us to see. This is just a little giant land snail. Just a tiny one. The shell's only about the size or length of my palm, and I don't have very big hands at all. So it's quite a small giant land snail, which I always find is a bit weird to say. Look at its eye stalk. That is so cool. It almost looks like, you know those time lapses of fungus? That's kind of what it looks like. Like it's about to release spores, which is of course not the case, for the snail is a mollusk and therefore reproduces by sort of normal means. Sort of. Because, of course, A snail takes a little while to cover distance. I think in the time that we've been sitting here, it's probably covered about, I don't know, I suppose probably around about 10 inches in distance, which has not been very far at all. Now, as you can imagine, that makes romance quite difficult. There's no snail dating sites that they can just log on to and see where their nearest mating potential is. You know, obviously if they did have one, they'd have to set the radius of where their suitable partners might be as a very, very small distance, because it's not as though they can jump off and race off to a mating potential. What that means... Emma, that was very good. Getting texts on their shell phones.
Kirsty good.
That was Kirsty good. Well done, Emma. That was professional, and I think you've well earned your leave. No, that was incredible. I've been completely derailed my train of thought. Completely derailed my train of thought. I think I was going to say something along the lines of why I'm talking about snails and dating websites is because, or apps as they are now apparently, when they do find a suitable partner, what that means is that they have to make the most of the opportunity presented to them. And so they are both capable of fertilizing each other, which is a fantastic way of ensuring that they come out of that union with two sets of deployed offspring, essentially. Then what they'll do is they'll go off and they'll find a secret hiding place under rocks, sometimes in the sort of crevices of bark. Oh dear, he appears to have run into an obstacle. No date for you. And they'll go off and they'll lay their eggs. So they are capable of fertilizing their partners and vice versa. They will also eat decaying plant material, decaying carcasses. That's so cool. That is amazing. Oh, I'm channeling Sydney there. This is amazing. Oh. I hear a car driving off-road. I think someone might have found Hosanna before we did, unfortunately. I got so distracted by the snail. Obviously, it makes sense for them to be able to retract their eyes. I'm not going to touch the eye in order to show you how it springs back into the head. I want to know how they do that. Is it sort of pneumatic? Do they pump fluid up into it? I bet they do. I don't really know how, but I guess it must basically... I must be careful how I phrase this now. When it has to retract, it presumably drains so that it shrinks downwards, and then when it needs to come back up again, it gets pumped full of fluid. You get the idea. I'm going to stop going down this train of thought. Look at the patterns on its skin. Well, again, I don't even know if you'd describe it as skin. It's sort of epidermis. Yeah, I suppose epidermis. What a thing nature has given us. Whoa. Seb, this is your sighting, my friend. I'm actually just talking nonsense so that people can enjoy the visuals without worrying that we've lost audio. I mean, I could quite happily be quiet and we could put over a track of birds. Whoa! Seb says it's such a cool subject to film. Kristen, I touched on it briefly, but I didn't really fully describe it. Kristen wants to know what they eat. Decaying plant material, carcasses as well, if they find themselves some carcasses. They found themselves a carcass. Again, probably about as difficult for a snail as finding themselves a date. They can actually feed off old bones as well. They've got quite a varied diet. Obviously, the more calcium they can get, the better, because they produce that shell and it grows with them. I actually did get asked by somebody whether or not a snail is like a hermit crab, and if it's actually attached to its shell, or if it is able to discard the shell and move off. Just an odd question. They are very much attached to their shell. They grow it themselves. Oh, oh dear, wait, I'll help you out there, Seb.
Thank you.
Hold on. We're helping the snail out as well as it happens.
It's charging the camera now.
He's coming. Seb, just don't run, okay? Don't run. It'll be okay. It'll be alright. If you have to go, what a way to go.
Yeah.
How are you feeling? Are you surviving the camera there?
Yeah.
Cool.
It's so good.
Alright. Our bushwalk cameramen have to do this all handheld. Just remember that. So they're carrying the heavy broadcast pack and at the same time keeping the camera steady and focusing. So just bear that in mind as you're watching this. You know, all the other macro shots in documentaries, most of those are done in studio surrounds with a nice tripod and all sorts of things. Watch the way it navigates this leaf, it's so cool. None of that happens here at Wild Earth. This is our studio. No tripod for Seb. Got to rely on his forearms. Seb is getting closer. He's coming for you.
Going to climb into the lens.
Okay, well, we've got an escape route if we need one. You know, just step a meter backwards and you're all good. Oh!
Oh no, another one.
Actually, Karen, that's what I was thinking about. I got distracted by the eye stalks. Isn't it amazing that nature has created such a vulnerable-looking creature? Now, Karen wants to know if many birds will eat the snails. Yes, indeed. So not only do they have to struggle to find a date, or indeed a suitable restaurant to dine out in, they run the risk whenever they're heading in that direction of being swooped down upon by a bird, particularly ground hornbills. Ground hornbills really like them, but you can imagine that most larger birds would, because even though it does have that protective shell, it will disappear into it, but it can't cover up the entrance. So all a bird has to do is turn it upside down and pick out the flesh from inside. Quite a macabre thought. I'm quite attached to this snail now. I don't want it to be eaten by a bird. Little cats will do it. Jackals will eat them as well. And humans. African giant land snails are considered to be edible and a delicacy by certain people. And as far as I know, it would be illegal in a protected area like here, just because it's any of the fauna or flora is, you don't damage it in any way. But as far as I know, it's not illegal to eat them outside of the reserves. People eat snails. This is just a much larger snail. I hope there are plenty of them, though. Actually, I don't know. I have absolutely no idea how many giant land snails there are. That was really cool, Seb. Well done. Well, I suppose we better go and find a leopard now, since Herbie's been working so hard at showing us invisible tracks. I'm quite convinced he's making it up, but he's insistent that Hosanna walked here. We're going to go and see if we can find him. Let's go to Tristan, who's already found his cats for the day.
Well, I don't know, Jamie. I think it's quite wonderful that you've spent so much time with those snails. I absolutely love them, and especially if you can get what Seb has done. Apparently, well, you're getting very much up in the face of that snail and getting it all over the sort of kind of coming towards the camera. It's very, very cool. I think giant land snails are absolutely awesome little creatures, and it's always nice to give them lots of attention. And, you know, our leopards get a fair amount, as well as, I suppose, the lions and everything else. And so it's nice now with the summer months that we start to get things like the snails coming out and that we can start to look at them once again. I don't know if we've seen any giant African land snails until today, which is a good sign. It means that the rains are falling nicely in Djuma, and hopefully things are going to spruce up and green up quite quickly. Now, not much has changed with our lions. They kind of all flopped down, bar this one, who's still just kind of looking as regal as ever on top of his little mound, which is almost like a throne, with the kind of escarpment in the background. As you can see with the rest, though, there is actually 7 lions sleeping there. You can only see one's back, but the rest are just below it, all in the exact same position, which is passed out and sleeping. They are in no way looking like they're going to do too much. I don't know if we'll spend too much more time with them. We are still missing, by the sounds of things. Well, I mean, I was talking to Brent just now, and he was saying to me that he had 16 of them before he left. So we know that there's 10 here, which means 6 are missing, and it would be then 2 adult females and 4 others. Now, there might be one that's lost. I'm not sure, because I was also talking to Steve, and he was saying the last time he saw them was 15. So I don't know. Maybe there's 15 only left, and maybe one of the sub-adults, unfortunately, something's happened to them. I'm not sure, but we'll try and see. At the moment, like I said, there's only 10, which would mean that there are still quite a few that are missing and kind of going away. Now, James, have you spotted something in the distance? No, I don't think they're lions, James. I think they might be topi in the distance. So James has spotted something in the distance, but let's just double check what it is. Yes, they're topi that are all the way down at the bottom. I wonder if maybe that's what was hunted last night. Maybe they got a young topi, because there's quite a few young ones all the way down at the bottom. And there's also another lion that's kind of just sort of resting that we saw a little bit earlier. But basically down towards sort of this area is where James is talking about. That's where those topis are kind of milling about, and this is where those 4 came from. So that's why he was thinking maybe they could be lions coming this way. But you can see lots of little baby ones in there, and that's probably why. There's also a truck. Isn't that nice truck that's going past there? It's the main road that comes from Olololo Gate. That's why it's quite busy there. And you'll find that with these guys that there's, I know it was a great truck sighting, Emma. I thought it was fantastic. Nice pace across the screen. It's very, very nice truck sighting. And there's the last of the sort of lions that's sleeping. I think what we're going to do, though, is we're going to probably leave them now and go and try and see what else we can find. But while we do that, let's send you back across to Trish and see what she's up to down south.
Well, I did have something quite special. And then he decided to fly away, as these animals do when they know that they're going to be put on the spot. But we had a wonderful white-backed vulture. Now, what you can see is a bit of the nest there in the tree. Now, we're actually unsure whether it might actually be the chick that's grown up that we've been looking at, or whether it was the adult. Ah, can you see right at the back? It's landed at the tree behind. Oh, I don't think it's the same one, but we have another white-backed vulture. I quite like them. I think they're all hanging about and kind of waiting for it to warm up for this, so that they can catch a thermal and get up there into the air. White-backed vulture. I've seen quite a few of them lately, especially we found a carcass, and they were all around, jumping about, and I think they're so funny with their shoulders all up in their neck, jumping. Good news comment was that nest is quite high up there. It is quite high up there. But we've also got to remember that these are birds. So they can get there if they need to. And most importantly, it's out of the reach of the other animals around. Just perching, waiting. I didn't quite catch that name, Emma. Please give it to me again, because I want to say it correctly, because I love vultures too. Lenny! Lenny says he loves vultures. It's vulture time. Well, I'm excited to hear that, because I do too. I really do like vultures. Guys, if I could describe to you the type of day it is today, it's just golden. It's golden. There's little bits of greenery. It seems greener, all from yesterday's rains kind of coming on. So I'm really enjoying this morning. Look at that. Can you see the glow? The bush has a glow. Even if you look at the plants around us, we have a silver cluster leaf in front of us that looks like the raindrops have sat on it and then the sun has illuminated it. Beautiful. And we have some marulas, all looking lovely. I love seeing all these little spots of light. Speaking of light, let's go back to Brent, who is driving into some light.
Indeed I am, and I'm hoping to put some kitty cats in the light shortly. I'm looking for the Nkauma pride. And they were last seen just to the south of here. No sign of them heading into Chitwa, so I'm hoping they came this way. So after the rain, we're just going very, very slowly and trying to see if we can find any tracks, preferably tracks that are on top of the rain, and preferably from this morning. But so far, no such luck. But it is a beautiful morning to be bumbling about in the bush and just soaking up the morning sunshine. And hopefully we will be finding some lions in not too long. But before the lions, we have some little birdies. And blue waxbills, one of the sweetest, smallest little birds that we get around here. Beautiful. It's always good to I hear some ground hornbills in the distance. No roaring lions or alarming impala or kudu. We're just going to keep trundling along and keep our eyes peeled. So these seep lines like this attract a lot of grazers such as zebra and wildebeest and impala, so it's always a good spot to check. Morning, James Richard would like to know, do we need more rain before we start getting jewel beetles? We might get jewel beetles after this last set of rain, but yes, normally we do need a little bit more rain to start seeing them frequently. At the moment, just a lot of fruit chafers around. And none of the pretty fruit chafers, just the boring yellow ones. Or tan ones, I suppose, a better description. Very quiet, not a soul about, not even an impala. Now, before Tristan went off to Kenya, we had a discussion that one of these mornings, we're not sure which one yet, we're going to have a Djuma versus Mara bird competition, but alas, not this morning, but Tristan does have a bird to show you.
No, not yet, Brenty. We'll wait, but we will do one. But we have to do one before Brenty leaves, otherwise it just wouldn't be the same. We'll try and do a Mara Djuma bird off. But anyway, talking about birds, you can see we've got a beautiful western banded snake eagle that is sitting very, very prettily on this dead tree. It's a bird that we don't see down in Djuma at all, so it's always nice when we get to see them up here. It's one of the sort of nice parts about being in the Mara is the amount of different birds that we get. So a lot of things that you wouldn't see down south. And then these guys, while they are seen in the southern African sub-region, they're not seen at Djuma itself at all. If they were seen at Djuma itself, it would be incredibly rare. And I reckon it would be probably the first recorded sighting of one of these guys on the sort of in the Sabi Sands. fans. But quite easily identifiable as a snake eagle. It's got that typical robust rounded head that most of the snake eagles have. It's also got those kind of big eye that they use to be able to hunt. Remember that these guys will be looking out for any sign of movement in the grass, and then they'll kind of come down and they'll grab the various slithering serpents that are below them. So need a really good eye to be able to see what's going on. The other way we can tell it's kind of a western band snake eagle as well. Out here we get the brown snake eagles and the black-chested snake eagles. And both of those are slightly bigger birds. So these guys are a little bit smaller, much more sort of grayish appearance. And then they've got that little white tip to the tail that you can see. It's not easy, but there's a little bit of it kind of down at below. And the cere on this animal is not quite as bright as what you would see from something like a brown snake eagle. It's got a little bit more muted yellowish color to it. So very, very cool bird to see, and one that I haven't seen too many of. Last time I was here we didn't have that many around, so it's nice that there's one sitting ever so prettily for us this morning. And it'll be good for raptors this morning. We had a bit of rain yesterday evening, and so some of them will still be sitting up against the sort of on the trees waiting for the sun to come up and dry. Now, MGN, there's a lot of eagles out here. Well, yes, so this Mara escarpment is a highway essentially for a number of eagles that fly up and down and migrate north-south. And Steph was telling me the other day, I need to try and get hold of him and ask him what the figure was exactly, but he was talking to one of the guys that studies the raptors in this particular area, and they were talking about how many birds pass by along the escarpment per day during the height of the sort of migratory periods of the raptors, and it was an astronomical figure, one that kind of you wouldn't believe. I seem to remember it being something like 2,000 birds a day or something like that crossing through here. So it'll be interesting to know. I'll try and get hold of Steph and find out again from him exactly how many it was. And there you can see it's kind of looking towards us now, and there's that sort of yellow-grey cere, and there's big eyes that we always know from a snake eagle. But it's an amazing kind of area because a lot of the birds kind of use this escarpment and ride the sort of thermals as they go along. It's pretty interesting, and you'll get a number of different species kind of cruising up and down. When you sit at camp, it's really quite special because you can sit and you can have crowned eagles come past, long-crested eagles, steppe eagles, tawnies, bateleurs, and just up and down flying along the escarpment. It's really, really quite special. So it's a great place. If you're a big Raptors fan, then the Mara is a very good place to be. Lots and lots of very nice raptors here. Forgot the auger buzzards, they also cruise around as well, so it really is quite nice. Good, we're going to carry on. We're going to just so slowly kind of worm our way along this sort of riverine thicket in the hope that we maybe bump into a leopard. This is a good place for that shepherd's tree male, the big male of the Mara. And so it's a good place to check around, and there'll be lots of other leopards that are seen in this area. A few very shy females, but we'll try and see. Maybe we get lucky with a little spotted cat somewhere along the line, and then we're going to worm our way down south towards the North Clan Den, because we're going to just go and check in what's happening there. I know a number of people have been wondering about the North Clan, and I'm pretty sure Jamie would like to get an update as well. So that's kind of the plan for the morning. We'll see what else comes our way. You never know. Maybe we'll get lucky and we'll get other things lurking about. Maybe we'll even get something like a cheetah somewhere around. This is actually not a bad place to look for them when you go up along the escarpment road, because not many people drive it, and funnily enough, Steve said he had a male cheetah here the other day, which was quite nice. So we're going to try and see what we can find. Maybe there's lots and lots of interesting things, but while we do that, let's send you back across to Brent, who's, well, stopped looking for the lion momentarily and is now looking for small things.
Well, it is a ferocious predator, but a very small one who doesn't know we're watching him through a gap, or her, and it's the little slender mongoose doing some morning grooming. There you go, cleaning the tail, and it's very seldom we get to spend much time with these little creatures. Oh, morning grooming is done. Off on the prowl and on the hunt now. I don't think we're going to get another view. Even if I roll backwards. Is it coming towards us? Oh, there you go. There he is. Oh, this is awesome. It's so nice to actually see them out in the open. They're normally a golden blur as they disappear. This is a very relaxed mongoose. Let's try and roll back and see if we can roll far enough back past this termite mound. And I think think. You see him, Craig? No, he's disappeared. Let's try. Oh, I think starting the car is going to send it scurrying, but we'll... Oh no, he's still there. A very relaxed slender mongoose. Now I actually do think he's disappeared properly. We're not going to be able to see them anymore. That was awesome. Our child of the universe would like to know, what is the difference between a slender and a dwarf mongoose? Well, they are completely different species of mongoose. Slender are obviously that lovely golden color, whereas dwarf mongoose are dark brown. Dwarf mongoose are social mongoose. They live in businesses of around 15 to 20 individuals, where the slender mongoose are solitary and far more carnivorous than a dwarf mongoose. Dwarf mongoose will eat a lot of invertebrates and fruit and seeds and stuff, whereas the slender mongoose is far more, it hunts a lot more birds and little mammals such as mice and stuff like that. It will also eat insects, but it is far more of a meat eater than dwarf mongoose. Okay, still no sign of these Orions. No sign of tracks, but as I say, it rained quite hard for a while last night. So the tracks could have very easily been obliterated. We want to find some tracks that are on top of the rain. So they were pretty much opposite us yesterday. Okay, well, we're going to keep searching steadily through the southern sections of Torchwood. While we do that, let's go see where Jamie's off to on foot.
So we have good news and, well, I guess in a way bad news. I actually feel quite guilty because Herbie has spent his whole morning tracking, and I can hear something. Cool. I think there's... Are you hearing Ellie, Seb? Okay. We're going to walk that way again. Well, it's not an elephant, but we still have to walk that way. I'll say no more, for I am unable to, unfortunately. Right, what were we talking about? I can't remember. Oh, they found Hosanna before we did. We put them on the tracks, and they have found him. The good news is that they've said we can walk into him, but we've just got to wait until the various guests have had a chance to see him. So we know where he is. It changes things a little bit when really we walk animals to go and find them. We don't really walk them when we know where they are. We're making an exception this time for Hosanna because he is so relaxed on foot. It doesn't bother him any more than the vehicles do. So it's something that I feel personally, from my sort of guiding ethics, I feel personally comfortable with. Normally, if it was Tundi, for example, and we were searching for her and they found her before we did, we'd pull out and we'd move off. Same goes for the lions. But with Hosanna, who doesn't change his natural behavior when there's people on foot around him, I don't feel so bad. Plus, I feel terribly guilty because we would have found the leopard. Herbie put in all the effort and we would have found the leopard if we hadn't stopped at each and every single little thing that we found.
Sorry, Herbie.
Sorry, Herbie. For those of you that don't know, that's Herbie. Herbie is the most qualified guide at Wild Earth, actually. And he somehow agrees to this thing that we do. When we go on bushwalk, he agrees to help us look for animals, find the animals, and of course he also keeps us safe. So we've got earpieces, we're walking, and we can't really concentrate, hence why I just went walking off that way, which was not my best plan. And Herbie, everybody says hello. So Herbie keeps us safe. There you go. Herbie keeps us safe. Okay. I'm sort of stuck here. I can't go that way for unknown reasons. I can't go that way because there's a leopard there. So I have to sort of stay. I'm going to look and see if I can find something small. In the meantime, off to Tristan, who's found hopefully one of North Clan, but we'll have to go find out from him.
Indeed we have, Jamie. We found something that is your favourite in the form of a hyena that is, well, busy eating jerky / biltong at this stage. This is not a fresh carcass at all that it's eating. This is a remnant of the migration that passed through. I believe it was about, I think in early October, there was lots and lots of wildebeest up in this area where we are now. And so this is a very dry carcass. You can see the way that it's being rolled around. It's very desiccated, and it will be almost, like I say, like dried meat. But what's probably happened is, and I would imagine this is going to be true for a lot of these kind of dried out carcasses, because when you drive around at the moment, these dried up carcasses are pretty much everywhere. You'll get every sort of 15-20 minutes, I mean, you'll find one. So you know, when maybe 2 or 3, there's lots around. But basically what probably happened is last night with that bit of rain and the moisture, you might have found that the carcass itself has softened up a little bit, and so that means that it's perfectly kind of, well, edible, I suppose, for things like hyenas. Even though it's dried out and would essentially be rotten meat, these guys would still be able to deal with that. And because it's drier, you probably find that it's almost preserved in some respects. And so when that meat softens it makes it just a little easier for the likes of hyenas to kind of come up and clean it all up. And so that's what this guy is busy doing. He's busy eating that kind of dried up skin and a few bones that it's crunching through, and that will be good nutrients at the end of the day. If it hasn't found food during the course of the night, this is, I suppose, the second best option, and it's easy food. It's not really taking any energy to be able to kind of find it, but I suppose the energy is coming in and that it's difficult to actually eat. But you can see how stiff and dry that carcass is. The fact that the legs are pulling up and it's rolling the way it is gives you a good idea of just how dry it is. Now Conrad says that this is a good piece of biltong. Conrad, I feel like you and I need to have a chat. But now Conrad is a connoisseur of meat, and so I'm surprised that he says it's a good piece of biltong, because normally, you know, Conrad would be in a place where he would be able to kind of get much better quality biltong than what we've got from this particular hyena. Conrad, I'm disappointed. I would have thought that you would have said that this is not good biltong, that this is the kind of dregs and only fit for a hyena. I'm surprised that you, of the connoisseur of meat that you are. Yes, exactly. Good, Emma. He must hang his head in shame, because this is not fine biltong at all. This is biltong that has taken quite some time to dry out and is probably not tasty at all. Imagine actually trying to cut a piece of that off and eating it. I think you would be very, very ill if you had to eat that. I don't think you would have a very good time of it at all. But as the hyena seems happy, it seems as though it's a good piece for him. And I suppose out here, beggars can't be choosers. And this particular hyena that we're with is probably in all likelihood from the Olololo clan, that we kind of north west of where the current den site is, according to Steve. So Steve said he found a den site with 7 little ones, and so this would be northwest of that. We wouldn't find the North Clan pushing up this way, so this is one of the members of the Olololo clan. Now we don't know the Olololo clan nearly as well as what we know the North Clan, and it's because these guys are quite transient in and out of the reserve. They go up on the escarpment and into the community areas and then kind of move around quite a bit, and so a little bit more tricky to kind of spend time with them. So ultimately we don't know exactly who it is or how old it is, but it's definitely a happy hyena eating away. Good, we're going to leave this hyena to finish up its carcass. We're going to carry on off towards the North Clan den and see what's happening down there. But while we do that, let's send you across to Trish, who's joined the search for small things and has got one of Sydney's favourite animals doing its thing.
I've also got something very happy. A happy dung beetle. He or she is definitely very happy. There's a heap of dung here. In fact, if you can see right here. Hello. Slowly eating away. Let's open this up a bit. See what else there is in there. So that's fairly cold. So it's been here for a while. So it's given the dung beetle some time to sift through it all. And you can see that it's all kind of spread out and broken up on this end. And that's just because of what this guy's been doing. So why is he actually doing this? Apart from the fact that, of course, I mean, this is dung and he's a dung beetle and he's going to be eating some of it, he's also looking for a partner. Isn't that exciting? In a pile of dung, looking for a partner. So what he will do is he'll mooch about here. Maybe some attractive female comes along, and then he says, "Oh, you look like you'd do for me." And then he rolls this magnificent ball to attract her. Then she says, "Oh yes, definitely. You look like the one." Then she latches on and they roll this ball away. And this is called their nuptial ball. Can you see how excited he is about the story? Because he knows it's happening for him. So they'll roll away this nuptial ball and they'll begin to eat together. And of course mate. Then once the female falls pregnant, she'll come back here and she'll roll up another ball in which to lay her eggs. And then he would have completed his life mission, and that is make more of me, as is with all animals. So I think that's really cool. I do enjoy the little things. It's a bit cool now, so he seems to have just been a bit stationary. But don't worry, little guy, you'll find the right girl. So this is a plum dung beetle. Very cool. In and amongst the rhino midden. Hey, don't you think that's cool? I do. I'm gonna hop back in. So if you guys actually remember, when I did my interview drive, I'm Trishala, by the way, I'm sure you guys know this. When I did my interview, not my interview drive, but before that, when we had to do to apply for this job, we had to do a little kind of segment, and I did mine on a beetle, well, a rhinoceros beetle. So I do have a long love for these creatures, especially insects. I do like them. Well, we are going to move on. I am getting my hands dirty. I didn't quite catch that name, but purple, one of my favorite colors. It's hard for me to choose favorites, but purple is definitely one of them. But yes, I like to get my hands dirty. It's part of being in the bush. Definitely. Anyway, let us move on. Yeah, I quite enjoy them. Well, from one small mighty creature, let's go to Brent with the king of the jungle.
Indeed I am, but Trishala, you'll find the king of the jungle is the king of the savannah is an elephant, and the lion is just somewhere in between. Now, we have not found any lion tracks, unfortunately, so, as I said, with this ground being rained upon, we have to go very slowly. We're also hoping that we might have a little bit of luck with Tlalamba in this area. So it is just very, very beautiful, so I have no complaints at all. I quite like bumbling along slowly, having a look at what we can see. Let's have a look on this road. No tracks there. Actually, hang on, what was that? When we checked First Rock, I was hoping to find a lion lazing on the rock, but alas, I thought I saw something. Oof. This ground is so hard. But we have been driving along the edge of the Moanini, hoping for any luck, but as I said, no such luck. We're going to make our way towards Second Rock and then maybe check back towards Chittercut Line. But as of yet, no sign of any kitty cats. Not even the hint of a track. Child of the Universe would like to know, is it healthy for big cats to eat a variety of animals? Not necessarily. Meat is meat and a cat must eat. So they will be happily eating scrub hares, impalas or buffalo or elephant. And they're not too concerned about variety in their diet as long as it's meat. And there's no real reason for them to actually have a very varied diet, which they do just because they catch different creatures. But there's no necessity for them to have a varied diet. So, yeah, look on those big termite mounds in the distance, hoping for a leopard, but there's not one. Okay. It's amazing how quickly the green comes out after a bit of rain. Now, we need quite a bit more rain, to be honest. Average rainfall for December in this area is between 70 and 100 mils, and I'd say we've probably had just under 20 in the 2 bouts of rain we've had. So 80 to go for a good December, and 60 to go for an average December. In terms of rain, that is. Well, it sounds like Tristy's having lots of fun with all the feathered creatures in the Mara. So why don't we go see what bird he has found now. Has he finally found an Egyptian vulture?
So just now we showed you that western banded snake eagle, and now we've got one of its cousins. This is the black-chested snake eagle. So we're talking about the various ones, and it's a nice example of one of the other ones. You can see how different it looks. It's already a much bigger bird. It looks bigger, and I can tell you that it is bigger just from sitting near it. You also notice it's got that white sort of chest area and then that black head, and you can see those very, very, very kind of bright yellow eyes that are contrasted by that dark head. And these guys, you can see them in the Sabi Sands. We do see them every now and then. There's one bird that I see around Impala Plains, Vertella Access, that area on Juma every now and then. It flies around there. But they're far more common out here. I mean, these are birds that you'll see quite a lot of if you drive around the Mara. But typical snake eagle shape. It's very similar to what we saw earlier in the way its kind of head is very rounded, which is what we were talking about. And then they've kind of got those featherless legs that come up, and then that sort of small beak with those bright eyes. It's quite a trait of the snake eagles themselves, and you can kind of tell snake eagles apart quite easily. But this was just such a nice kind of sighting of one, because up against that blue sky is absolutely beautiful. Isn't it nice? I think it's very, very cool. These guys are beautiful, beautiful birds. So it's always good just to stop and have a little look around. Also, the reason why we kind of stop along these edges is because where this bird is sitting is right up against the forested section. Now, there's an elephant as well, which is quite nice. We haven't seen many ellies this morning, but there's an elephant that's just to the sort of bottom left of where this bird is. So up against the forest. I'll go forward a little bit for you, James, just so you can see it. Let's just try to go a little further forward. In fact, there's 2 elephants. There's not even just one. There's a whole herd. Hold on. Let's just go slightly forward. It's going to be much easier for James if I do. So if we turn slightly here. There we go. So they're slowly coming out of the forested areas now, which is, I suppose, they're coming down from the escarpment. So what happens with these ellies is often at night they come from this sort of grassland area, and then they push up onto the escarpment, and they go and feed off all of the different trees that are up there, and they kind of spend their night up there, and then sometimes they'll then come back down, and then they feed again along these edges. And what will happen is, as the sun gets hotter and hotter, while they've fed on the grassland area, they'll then slowly shift back into the forest a little bit where they can get some shade. So the ellies are quite mobile here. They move a lot, and they kind of constantly in this ebb and flow from the escarpment down into the sort of basin area and then into the forest. And it's a beautiful scene when you see these ellies amongst all this vegetation, and you see these kind of big trees and ellies in amongst it. It really is pretty, and it's kind of nice because it's so green in comparison to what we've been seeing at Djuma. Djuma's been so brown that it's nice to see some ellies in amongst some nice green vegetation once again. But it's a beautiful morning, isn't it? You can see they're taking it very easy. And most of what they're going to be feeding on at the moment is going to be little forbs and grasses that are going to come up after the rain that we had yesterday. You'll find that there will be some new shoots that are going to come through, so some nice green tender grass, as well as little trees that are going to start to seed and start to come up. And that's what the ellies will be looking for. As soon as rain comes along, it's a very quick process to see plant life and vegetation growing, and obviously the Mara gets a lot more rain than what Djuma does, and so is constantly got a serious amount of food for these guys. And so what they do is they can be very selective, is that they'll go and just pick up little bits as they move along, and you can see what it's eating there is not large, a very small tree that it's breaking apart and feeding on, and doing the typical ellie thing where they brush it off a little bit before they feed on it. It seems as though it's just the 3 that I can see now. No, there's a 4th one coming out. So there's quite a few, I think, still inside the forest that are slowly coming out. They would have, like I said, come down from the escarpment. And so I suppose they've got to cross through the forest first. And that's why, as we kind of going around the corner, more and more are starting to appear. And there probably are quite a few still hidden within this thicket that we can't see. But very pleasant to see ellies first thing in the morning. I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of them a little bit closer than those guys. So we'll carry on and go and see. There's a number of cars that are in the marsh area to our left that have stopped, so we're going to go and just have a little quick look. I wonder if it's not the other lions that we heard roaring earlier. Carol, so there's small little riverbeds and things like that up in the escarpment that the ellies can go and drink at. Down below where we are, there is actually a small dam that is used for the water for the camps, so they go there, but there will be little natural water points all the way through. In fact, you know, when I was here in May and that time of the year, all of those water points were no longer little streams or sort of feeder systems. They were raging rivers that came down, and so there will be little pockets of water that they'll be able to find up in the escarpment areas. And so even though they go up there at night to primarily feed, they still will be able to find water up in those areas as well. So, you know, they're clever animals. They know exactly where to go to find everything that they need to make sure that they survive. In fact, it's actually quite nice from here because we're a little bit closer than what we were earlier. So just going to try to get past this little tree quickly. There we go. So I'll just go around like that. Very pleasant to see them kind of, like I say, up against that forest. It's one of those kind of surreal scenes when you see these guys peacefully feeding and big tall trees behind them and that bright blue sky. It's very pretty. You can see how white their tusks are as well. They often after rain you'll find ellies' tusks seem to appear that much whiter. They kind of get a little bit of a wash and clean off, and they appear to look a little bit clean. Now also what's interesting with these guys is that in South Africa we find that our ellies often have quite dirty tusks, and that's because our ellies use their tusks a lot for breaking off branches and sort of stripping that cambium layer, as well as digging up roots and all kinds of other things. And so you often get a kind of staining to the tusk, whereas here in East Africa, that elephants, particularly in the Mara system, feed a lot more grasses and those kind of things, and it seems as though their tusks stay a lot cleaner and a lot whiter than what ours do. They don't tend to stain as much. I mean, it's obviously probably because they're used far less. It's also why they end up being a lot straighter and longer than what we see from the females in Djuma, and particularly females is what I'm talking about. The male elephants here do get stained tusks too. MDR, you do got to love how elephants just take it easy. I suppose when you're the size they are, there's nothing else to do but just to have a really kind of chill time of it. And they live a very charmed life, don't they? Other than the fact that people try and hunt them for their tusks, really nothing else goes after them, and they're able to kind of spend most of their time just really sort of taking it easy, feeding, drinking, bullying everybody else if they need to go where they want to go. And so it's quite a charmed life that an elephant leads, and it's a very kind of laid back, I would say, existence. I mean, there's not too much time that these guys are under stress if they are within the park areas. As soon as elephants, though, start to shift out, like I say, humans become a bit of a problem, and it becomes much harder for us to be able to, kind of coexist with them, and that means that they then have a much more strained life. But when they like this and they're feeding within these reserves and across Africa, they really are kind of at peace, and they have a very charmed existence. Isn't that beautiful? I think so. I think it's quite nice up against the forest. There's something about it. It just reminds me a lot of being in places like Mana Pools or even the Lower Zambezi where I was recently. That's the kind of feel that you get as Ellie's constantly under a forest kind of canopy. And it's amazing how kind of these guys and the savanna elephants that we see, or the bush elephant as it's now called, the African bush elephant, you find that these guys are quite adept to moving around, and they expose themselves during the day quite comfortably. But when you go to places like the Congo, into the forest ellies, they don't really like to come out of the forest too much during the day. They tend to do it more at night and try and stick to the sort of thickets and the shade during the course of the day, and then at night kind of emerge onto these open sections, which is quite interesting. Right, we'll carry on. I'm going to go and investigate what all those cars have stopped for, and so while we do that and while our ellies kind of carry on feeding, let's send you back across to Trishala, who I think has got something else with tusks.
Yes, I do. I have some warthogs who are also taking advantage of this amazing day. They've got some passengers, though. Got some oxpeckers. Now, I can't tell which ones they are, but I am going to guess that they are red-billed. But I can't see very clearly. Isn't this cool, the two of them just moseying around, cutting the lawn? I love seeing these oxpeckers tag along on the back. Linda says, "Yay, Pumbaa!" Well, you know what, Linda? I actually thought that as soon as I saw them too. Especially when they were kind of walking off and they had their tail in the air, and it reminded me just of Pumbaa. Look at these passengers. It's as if these oxpeckers are not even interested in eating any parasites off them, just having a bit of fun on their backs. Emma says it's a bush taxi. It definitely is a bush taxi. It's just not getting very far. Maybe it's just a bush ride. So they're also getting some nice nutrients from the much nicer growing grass at this point from the rains. Yes, Emma, it is. It's a hop on, hop off. Get off where you like, free of charge. You might smell a bit afterwards, though. Carol would like to know if the hair always stands up straight like that. Most of the time it does, but it's not really a rule per se. I mean, if you look at it right now, it's kind of lying flat. Look at how they go onto their haunches, kind of, and their wrists, and they go right down to better be able to dig up into the ground. I think it's quite cute. Hair along their faces as well. Now, of course, they're called warthogs because of the warts around their face area. You can kind of see them there just below the eye. These guys are so fast. I remember I think it must have been a couple weeks ago, and we were on bushwalk, and in front of us, all you saw was something kick up dust. They were so quick. Around a termite mound, and all you saw was dust being kicked up. Anyway, these guys Karen would like to know if there's an advantage to having tusks. Of course there is an advantage to having tusks, and it's twofold actually. You'll be able to firstly defend yourself, your family, or in this case his sounder, and attack other males with. But with warthogs you've got to be careful of the other tusks in his mouth. Now those will get you. The ones on the side, yeah, they do look big, they look menacing, but the ones on the inside are much, much, much sharper. They're constantly getting sharpened. The ones on the outside are kind of, although they are sharp, I mean, you're going to get hurt with it regardless, but the ones on the inside are constantly being sharpened, whereas these ones are being worn away just a little bit. So yes, definitely an advantage to having these tusks. So, hello, have you finally seen us? It's quite funny. Well, let's see if Jamie can actually impersonate this walk on her bushwalk. Let's go to her.
I wasn't listening at all because we thought we saw something, so I wasn't listening. All I got was if Jamie can impersonate the warthog walk. Which warthog walk? When it's looking for food. Oh, goodness. Okay, all right. Okay, fine. No, but the problem is I'm structured very differently to a warthog. My legs are quite a lot longer compared to my body. Then I'm not built to be on all fours, so I have to bend my knees. Now this is not dignified, guys, and I've broken my wrist in the past, so my wrist doesn't bend that well. I fell over a fence. So what a warthog is doing when it's on its haunches, okay, just pretend that my legs are straight and not bent like this, because I don't feel like doing yoga this morning. This is what just looked up. It is so how uncomfortable this is. So what the warthog is doing is walking on its so uncomfortable. No, I won't break my wrist again. He is walking on its wrist joint, so on the carpals, the carpal bones, and its little hoofies are where my fingers are, and that's where its little hoofies are. Obviously, the warthog's got a much more extended area of space. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for asking me to do a comparison of warthog walk. It's really comfortable. Yes, Trishala, it's okay. It's all right, I'll remember it. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. Our wrists are not really built to bend that way. Ow. Oh, just another scrub here. Okay, I don't know why I took it so... I went to the extreme there. Okay, so that is the way that warthogs walk when they're snuffling for food. It is a very good thing to talk about, because every mammal is structured in exactly the same way, in the sense that there's the spinal column, the ribs, and each joint is exactly the same. Now, the bones in between might be different lengths. So for most of animals, most of the ungulates, the humerus or the femur is a lot shorter than it is proportionately than it is to us. We've got these long flaily limbs, particularly legs. But every joint bends the same way. So my elbow doesn't bend, I mean, not really, doesn't bend that way. And my shoulder can do a full rotation because it's a ball and socket joint, and my wrist really only goes like this, rather than, I suppose it can go backwards, but not very well. So every joint is essentially the same. The ankles, again, have that sort of range of motion. And around, but mostly like this. Knees like this. You know, hip bone connected to your thigh bone, or whatever the song was. Yeah, exactly. What was that from? I don't know what it was from. No, it's not, actually. Em says it's a kid's song. It's not. Or maybe it was originally, but it was in something called The Singing Detective with Michael Gambon. Is Michael Gambon? It is definitely not for children, The Singing Detective. I think that was where it was from. Don't know if it was a kid's song originally and it was part of his hallucinations. Anyway, I have absolutely no idea. Let's go across to Tristan, who has the luxury of being in a vehicle and therefore does not have to demonstrate a warthog walk.
Well, Jamie, it seems there's lots of contemplating going on, and glad you're quite safe from Hosanna stalking you, especially if you're walking around like an injured warthog piglet. That would have been definite stalking material had Hosanna still been around and close to where you were. Anyway, we're sitting with more Ellies, but an interesting elephant, because we often comment about the size of the tusks on the females out here in the Mara, and it's very seldom that we see a tuskless female. But here you can see there is an individual that has got no tusks. Now this is just basically a genetic thing. It does happen. We see it quite regularly in South Africa and in Zimbabwe and in Zambia and places like that. It happens as well, so it's not anything to worry about, but it's just sometimes you get this. But it's interesting here in the Mara system because you seldom see it. You see a lot of elephants with really beautiful long tusks, particularly females, and then you'll get every now and then one of these that has nothing, and it looks quite odd, doesn't it, when you see them kind of without tusks. And what's interesting is that we obviously always see our sort of elephants with tusks, and that becomes the norm for us, is whether it's male or female, it's tusks, and obviously the males then get generally much bigger tusks than the females do in terms of the sort of weight of them. But if you go up into Asia and places like Sri Lanka, which some of you may know, Taylor's actually heading there soon, a lot of the elephants there have no tusks, even the males. So it's actually quite unusual to find an elephant with tusks in Sri Lanka, which is quite strange. So all of the elephants kind of look like this female, bar a couple of the bulls that have got really big ones, but a lot of the males don't even develop tusks as well. So it's a complete different kind of thing to what we see out here. And I wonder often how it affects their sort of behavior and their general overall size, because tusks are quite useful for finding all kinds of food items. In a system like this, I don't think it's too much of a stress, but you often think about it down in South Africa or even in parts of Zimbabwe where those elephants are using those tusks all the time to try and find food elements. And I wonder if it inhibits their growth slightly, or it kind of just changes their sort of structure of their body a little bit by not having them. It would be interesting to know, and whether or not that gene that they have is passed down through generations, or if it kind of skips generations. It's quite a kind of interesting thing to think about. There's definitely, I've seen females with no tusks give birth to females, or to elephants that have tusks, and even little females. So it's obviously not something that once it's in that particular sort of gene, it's not kind of being carried down all the time. It's obviously just kind of skips a few generations and every now and then shows itself. But it's an interesting kind of thing. And you can see that this elephant hasn't broken those tusks off. The sort of area where the tusks would normally grow, there's no bulge there. Now, if a tusk is broken, a lot of the time there's still a piece that is inside that sort of lip line, and you still see a kind of little bulge where the tusk would be, whereas this female, it's kind of flattened there. The skin almost sags in, and so she doesn't have any tusks that have grown at all, so there's no breakage there. Plus it would be impossible for her to have broken both in a uniform manner, that they would both be inside the lip line. We know when tusks break with males and various kind of elephants, that there will be uneven breaking on them, so sometimes it's just the tip, or sometimes it breaks quite high up, but there'd never be a situation where both break within the lip line. So it's definite that she hasn't had any tusks her whole life, but she seems to be managing fine. She's big, she's healthy, she's got a number of offspring, and she's providing for them. So in a system like this, where there's a lot of grass and there's a lot of vegetation to feed on, it's a perfect kind of place for these guys to be able to still survive quite healthily without worrying too much about tusks. Good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to carry on going. We're going to carry on going kind of towards where those cars were in the marsh. I see a lot of buffalo here, so I wonder if maybe there wasn't some sort of lion activity. This is roughly where we heard those other lions kind of roaring from a little bit earlier when we were sitting with the Olololos. And so I wonder if maybe the two Kichwa boys are not somewhere in this general vicinity. It's quite close to where we actually had them. In fact, from where these elephants are, sort of, that's where they kind of were, to the sort of back right of where those elephants are, and you can see the buffalo are to the left of us, and so somewhere around here might be those two boys. So we'll go and have a little scratch around and see. We're also on the right road for the little Battier fox den, so we're going to go and have a little check around as well before we head a little bit further south. But you can see lots and lots and lots of buffalo milling about. They love this area. You always see buffalo from here. We used to have a camera up on the studio, and it points in this general direction, and I used to have the best time. You can ask Jamie. She always used to laugh at me because I used to sit there and look for all kinds of animals from the studio, and buffalo was by far the most successful one that I found. Buffalo, I think, and maybe what else? Elephants. Elephants would have been also something that I had a lot of success with. We were able to kind of find them quite regularly. But I did get lions once, and I don't think we ever got a leopard, but we did get rhinos. We got all kinds of things actually from up there. It used to be lots and lots of fun playing with that camera. I'm pretty sure I almost damaged it many times because I used to zoom in and out and try and follow birds of prey, which was quite something as well. That was always fun to try and follow the eagles that would fly past and see if you could keep up with them as you would kind of zoom in and out. And it was quite tricky actually. Birds of prey fly in a very odd pattern. Now, I do apologize about my slamming door. I'm going to have to close it because I cannot fit in these cars very well, and so if anything is on the right hand side, I have to get my legs out because otherwise I can't really turn too well because I've got no space to move. I'm not sure how Brent fitted in here because Brent is slightly taller than I did, and Keto has got the most space out of all these vehicles, so it's quite interesting that Brenty managed to somehow kind of fit inside here. I'm sure it didn't do much good for his back and his hip being squashed inside this for quite some time. Right, now let's carry on and see if we can find these little Battier foxes. I'm quite excited to go and see a little Battier fox den. It's been a long time since I've seen small Battier foxes. Good. We're going to jet off that way. While we do that, though, let's send you across to Brent, who's still on the search for those lions.
While I've abandoned the search for lions, I'm now looking for Shalamba in this area around here. Hopefully she's going to be sitting on top of a termite mound looking pretty. I could not find any sign of lions, so they might have actually gone south into Chitwa, but we're now very far away from there. So we've decided to go look for Kalamba. Now, yes, Tristan, it was those Mara vehicles are not the best to fit into, and even though these vehicles are also quite small, the nice thing about them is that because we don't have a door, which Tristan knows all too well because he fell out, never gets old, but yeah, you can stretch, you can do this, put your legs out, and stretch, which you can't do in the Mara vehicles. It's quite difficult. So we're going to head along this road, which is called Terminalia Road. Now, it's called Terminalia Road because there are a lot of Terminalia or silver cluster leaf trees on this road, and that's because it follows the top end of seep line, quite a few seep lines, so always quite a productive area, and I'm hoping we're going to get some luck in this area. You can see there's a fair bit of rain last night. It has made the road quite difficult to track on, but I'm hoping there's a bit of softer sand towards the end of this road that if there are any tracks we'll be able to spot them. I've got a feeling that Kalamba is just going to be sitting on top of a termite mound like this in this area, hopefully. If not, we might go back onto Juma, have a look for her mom. Her mom was seen last night after drive, but in Buffelshoek, and so she might cut in. Let me just... Sorry, I just heard something. I'm not sure what they found. I'm just going to ask quickly. Elvis. What have you got there? Okay, copy, thanks. No, nothing new. Oh dear, not even an elephant this morning. I mean, I think we've seen about 5 impala on our drive through Torchwood. It seems like everything might have moved to the east towards the Kruger boundary. Unfortunately, we don't have signal there, so it's the one part of Torchwood I haven't been this morning. We've got some likely leopard termite mounds in this area. But so far, no leopards on the mounds. Okay, so while we continue on, hoping to find sign of any kitty cat, let's send you back to Jamie, who does have some tracks to show you.
In the sense that I don't think we emphasize antelope tracks nearly as much as we should. And it's amazing how easy it is to become very rusty when it comes to identifying tracks. Also because it gives us a chance to take a break from walking because it's really, really hot. It's already at 7 o'clock in the morning because it was raining last night and because it's hot now. It's so humid. It's not unbearable yet. But it's probably close on 30 already. 23 is not. No, out here it's not. This is not 20. This is not 23. Google is lying to you. This is about what, 28?
Yeah,
27, 28 already. Look at this. The depth of the sand, the wetness of the sand, is such that when the wildebeest ran, the 2 sort of residual hooves, or the residual toes, they're not really hooves, the residual toes actually showed through in the track. And there's another example of it there. I don't know if this wildebeest had particularly prominent residual hooves. Something that you see more clearly quite often in warthog tracks and quite often in buffalo tracks when they're in deep sand, but not often wildebeest. So that's quite cool, actually. Oof. Seba had a sudden thought. I hope these are wildebeest. No, they are. No, well, waterbuck. Waterbuck. And the reason I'm not 100%... The reason I'm not 100% certain is because the sand has distorted them slightly. Waterbuck tracks are very heart-shaped. Joan says it looks like they're wearing high heels. I know. It really does. And you can see the way that they've dug into... This was running, this animal. And the reason that I know that is because you can actually see how, this is the back part of the track, it actually barely touched the ground with this footstep. Digging in for traction. So sort of a movement like that. And you get the fling of the soil away from it. And the hooves are very splayed because the sand is so soft. So they've actually split apart. Oh, look, coming to investigate. Look at that. I nearly jumped up and whacked my head on the antenna. No, it's not your fault. Oh, no, my shadow's on it. Not your fault, it was my fault. Seb, it's charging. Again. All the little things want to get you. Oh, thank goodness Seb is a brave and experienced professional. Preferenced is my new favorite word.
So?
Experienced and professional. Yeah, preferenced.
I like it.
I like it a lot. Baby millipede. Actually, I don't even think it is a baby millipede. I think it's a fully grown millipede. You do get different species, and some of them are much, much larger than others. So this one could actually be an almost fully grown adult. I've seen baby millipedes, and they're tiny. They're like little threads. Look at it go. Seb's had to move to a safe place. Repositioning. In order to remain secure, you've got to make sure that you always...
Safety distance.
Yeah, a safe distance away from it. Oh, stop now. Seb, I think you...
Scared him or what?
No, I was going to say, I think it was deeply intimidated. Realized that it could no longer surprise you. No longer had the element of surprise. No, he's still coming. Gathered his courage, gathered its wits. Actually moving quite fast. Now, I would say that that's the top speed of a millipede. I wish I had something to measure with. We could actually figure out what the top speed is. I'm guessing it's moving 1. Oh, no, don't stop. It stopped its... Oh! Said hello to you.
Yeah.
Reared up to say hello. Wait, Seb, there's something else. Oh, there's another... Don't put your camera down. There's a millipede about to crawl on it. There's another small millipede. Yeah. It's... Yeah. It's here. It stopped trying to crawl on it. It was about to climb onto the camera.
Oh.
It was completely frozen.
Infested.
It's definitely summer. Rain has brought out all manner of creepy crawlies. One's much paler in colour. Cool. Awesome. So, the insect festival continues. If you're wondering why I haven't gone to Hasana, it's because there were quite a few more people interested in seeing him on vehicle first. So we've abandoned that idea, I'm afraid, as much as I would like to go and see him on foot. There are so many vehicles making their way in that we don't want to ruin their sighting in any way. So we're going to make our way towards Treehouse Dam instead, see if we can figure out what's happening there. Back in the Mara, Tristan apparently has, I think Emma said, all of the browsers. All of them? Every single one? We'll have to find out.
We have all of the animals. We've got, well, a Jamie impersonator sitting there eating off the edge of the road. I think Jamie does it better. What do you all think? I think so. You can see they're having a fine time eating the nice short green grass that's growing on the sides. But it's not just them. We have a multitude of animals here. You can see the zebras are around, and in between them is a little Thompson's gazelle that's also sitting kind of feeding along. And so everybody is all clumped together. That's not also the only ones. There's also some impalas that are around on the other side of the road with some buffalo in the background. So lots and lots and lots of animals that are milling about in these marshy areas. It's a great place to come if you just want to have a bumble and you want to kind of see what's going on. We've always got something happening. There's typically lots and lots of different species, and it's one of the great things about being out here in East Africa is that you can often get these kind of little groupings together where you get multitudes of animals kind of hanging around. And I must say I thoroughly enjoy seeing the impalas here in the Mara. They are monstrous in terms of their horn size. You can see there's the horns of those boys there. They are huge in comparison to the Juma ones. Their bodies might not be any different and possibly might be slightly smaller, but their horn size is incredible. I mean, the spread on those is quite something. So they're always impressive animals when you see them out here. There's just kind of something about having those massive horns that come out. And you can see the one on the left, that's an individual that's probably only about 1.5 years old, maybe closer to 2, but those horns are already much longer than what you would see from a Juma impala at the same sort of age and the same sort of shape. They've got a much more kind of straight long feel to them, and very, very, very cool to see. It is a herbivore party because there in the distance you can see there's the rest of the animals that I was talking about. More zebras, there's a couple buffalo milling about in there. I think there might even be a wildebeest somewhere along their lines as well. So it's all the herbivores together, and I suppose this is where they come because the grazing is so good. You know, in the swamp there's lots of green grass in this area. You can see it's got a lot more greenery to it, a bit of heat haze as well. It's starting to develop, it's starting to get a bit warm, and so you'll find that this is a great place for them to come and feed. It's also nice and open. They can probably see predators quite well from here. So it makes sense to spend a lot of time, and then you sort of group together. There's topia as well that we've got in amongst this lot as well. So when they group together like this, it's much easier for them to be able to see predators too. So it's going to be very tricky for something like a lion or a leopard or cheetah to stalk up on these guys because of how many different eyes and ears there are, and also at all very varying levels. So you've got the very small antelope in the form of the little Tommies that are going to be watching from a low angle, and then you've got the things like zebras and buffalo that are much taller that will also be able to see, and then various animals have keener eyesight or keener hearing and sense of smell, and so hanging around in groups together is good. Giraffe too. So how many animals is that? Giraffe, zebra, topi, Thompsons, warthog, impalas, buffalo, wildebeest. And no, it is like bingo. So that is 8 animals in the same sort of field of view. Pretty sure we could maybe get some more. James is just picking them off one by one. He's kind of shooting animals all over the place at this stage. What else can we find out here? I'd imagine there would be some ellies somewhere within this area. If we scan around properly, I'm sure we can find an elephant somewhere here. But anyway, there's a lot of animals all in the same kind of spaces, and they're all milling about. There's an ellie there. There's the ellies there, so there's always an elephant around this area as well. So 9 different species all in the same place is quite something. I think if we came across this many animals all together, we would be having a serious celebration. But it's kind of par for the course in the Mara when you get into places like this, and so very, very cool to kind of see. Right, so we're going to keep going though. I want to also go and check around. We still haven't quite got to where all those cars were. K6, how do you plan on tracking and searching for leopards in the Mara? Well, tracking is a no. There's no tracking, unfortunately. You just write that off completely. One, because the roads are incredibly hard. 2, because, well, you can track the leopard on a road, but then from there, what are you going to do? You can't really carry on tracking it because you can't be off your vehicle tracking. So, no tracking of leopard, but what you can do to find leopards is that you can drive in areas that leopards like to hang about. And so, driving anywhere where you've got luggers where there's nice vegetation for a leopard to be able to hide is always a good idea. So areas where there's also little islands and pockets of trees, those are good places. And then the best way that I've found to find leopards here in the Mara is to scan in all the trees that you drive past. Now it sounds like a ridiculous thing, but it's true. So when you drive and you see a tree like this one, that's just a standalone tree. A lot of the time you'll just drive right past it and think nothing of it. But if you look into the tops of the tree, so where all that foliage is, often you can see a little tail dangling, or you'll see some sort of rosette pattern in there. And that's how I've found a lot of leopards out in the Mara, is by scanning trees like that one. It can be quite tricky and quite, it takes a bit of practice to kind of keep looking at all of them. And sometimes there's a lot of trees to kind of scan, but there are quite a few leopards that sit up in these trees, and because they're so foliated, a lot of them at the top of the tree, it can be quite tricky actually to spot them because they get right up in there, and the light and various other things can be quite hard to find. So you always just have a quick check of those, make sure there's nothing sitting in amongst those branches, and that's the best way really, is to try and put yourself in the places where a leopard would be. But unfortunately there's no real tracking of them, and like I say, we can't get out of our vehicles here and actually drive and kind of or get off on foot and track them off road. And so now James is telling me that there we go, that's exactly what we were looking for. Thank you, James. We can go forward a little bit more. Is bat-eared foxes are all here. Hello guys, these guys are super cool. So we're just going to go a little bit further forward. So there was a little carnivore in amongst all of it. I suppose omnivore is probably a better word for it than a carnivore. But there in the grass is our bat-eared foxes. Now, I don't know how many there are in total. A couple just ran off and down the hole, but there's 3 that I can see currently. They're such cute little things. I absolutely love bat-eared foxes. They've got the most ridiculous ears, obviously, as the name suggests, but they really are cool little animals, and obviously something that we really don't get to see all that often. Here we're lucky that there is a den that's right near the road, and so we can spend a lot of time watching them doing what pretty much most of the animals that are mostly active at night do in the day, and that is sleep. But it's nice to be able to get close-up views of them and to be able to kind of watch them as they go about their business. And like I said, 2 of them ran, I think, down in, so I think it's 5 in total. How many are there, James? Do you know? 6. Okay, so there we've 6 of them in total, which is very, very cool. And like I said, it's a bit of a surreal thing to be able to sit at a den. The place that I've seen them denning before is in the Kalahari. So if you go into the desert regions of South Africa, you get quite a lot of these guys, and there you can see dens and various other things, but it's still a special little animal for us. Our experience with them, as most of the guides I would imagine, is not huge. mean, Jamie probably spent quite a bit of time when she was on Swallow. She might have spent a bit of time with these guys, and Brent probably in all his travels has spent some time. But they're not an animal that we really get to see as much. You know, they, as we've spoken about, are very nocturnal, and so most of their time is moving around at night. And I believe a lot of you are oohing and eyeing at the cuteness of little fluffy bat-eared foxes. Well, they are super cute. I would love to see them as tiny, tiny, tiny little ones. I think they'd be very, very cool. They must just be all ears. We were talking earlier about the lions being all ears, but these guys must be next level when it comes to being little babies. They must have massive, massive ears and feet, and then be little fluffy balls of fur when they are tiny, tiny. But this is really cool to know that there is a den here, because I would imagine that they're going to use this, you know, again. I hope that they would use it again, and so maybe when these guys are all grown up, it would be good to come and just check around and maybe get them when they're tiny the next time they have a little litter. But it's all about sleeping for now. These guys are not going to be too active at this point of the day. You know, they've probably been milling about all night, and now that the sun is out, they're just getting nice and warm and toasty, and then they're going to probably go off and go and hide down in the burrow once it gets too hot. And so the activity for these guys is mostly going to be after the sun sets and before the sun rises, and you'll find them rooting around for all kinds of little insects that are out here, and scorpions and those kind of things in the grass. So they've got a ferocious little appetite, and it's funny to watch them in the desert, because they go and try and dig out the barking geckos and the various scorpions that live there in the desert areas of South Africa. There's a lot of scorpions, and I would imagine here in the Mara there's more than enough food for them to eat. In fact, these guys probably are quite lucky. They probably find a lot more food than those guys in the desert regions, because, you know, with the abundance of insects that must be around here, these guys must have an absolute field day of finding food, and must be quite easy in comparison, I would imagine. And lots of little insects in the grass. And if you watch ground hornbills feeding around here in the Mara system, you find how many sort of things that they can gather in a small space of time. You realize that there must be a lot going on. Now, interestingly enough, I would imagine that ground hornbills, funny enough, talking about ground hornbills, it's their nesting season at the moment. And I was just thinking about it as we were driving before we got to the bat-eared foxes, is that, you know, I haven't seen any ground hornbills in the last day, and normally in the Mara you see a lot of them, particularly in the area that we're in. They're normally all over the place, and so I'm quite surprised that we haven't seen any. I wonder if maybe it's because it's the nesting time that a lot of them are sitting on eggs. Now, ground hornbills unfortunately are not very good when it comes to nesting. Now, unfortunately, these guys are going to probably trot off as a car passes, but isn't that cute? Look how cute that little one is. So it looks like the adult at the back and then the little one in front. And I mean, not really. I suppose they're big in relation to the size of their head. So wild dog also has massive ears, but wild dog ears are a little bit more rounded than what these guys have got. These guys have got a bit more pointed kind of ear structure than what you see from a wild dog. And these are probably much larger also in comparison to the size of their head. I would imagine these are much bigger if you worked out a percentage. There it goes. Look at that though. Isn't that cute? Off it goes down the burrow. So I think that's unfortunately the last we're going to see of these little guys. There's one that's still left that's sleeping, but all the rest have disappeared down. But that is a serious cuteness overload. They are very, very cool little animals. I always like how they walk, because they've got this kind of little hunchback, and they kind of go along, and it's almost like their back legs are longer than their front legs. But there's a vehicle that wants to pass us, so we're going to get out the way for them so that they can do so, or they're just going to come past. So if you see a car driving through the shot, I do apologize. There it goes. Sorry about that, everybody. Now it's going to stop right in front of us. Delightful. There we go. It's now gone past. Good. Our bat-eared fox is still sleeping. It's taking it easy. We're going to sit here a little bit, see if those little ones come out again. In the meantime, though, let's send you back across to Jamie, who's bumbling about on her feet.
Bubbles! Bubbles, 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 bubbles. That's what we've got on our side. And water at a treehouse waterhole. I think waterhole would be a stretch as a description. What is it a terrapin, Seb?
So, yeah.
What is it? What is it doing? Should we see? Seb says learning how to swim after having had so long without water. Did it just die? What's going on? What are you doing, Terrapin? Maybe he's trying to wash the mud off it. Okay, wait, let me go around that side. So Seb and I are both in the same place and we don't scare it. This is not the most efficient terrapin I've ever seen. I've seen many terrapins swim and they glide through the water beautifully. Not sure what this one's doing. Ghost Cider says backstroke. This is sort of almost butterfly, this. Or overarm. I don't know. This terrapin is not very good at swimming. What if it's injured? Or maybe it's, maybe it's actually been spending its time tucked away in the mud of a treehouse dam and it's only just come out of estivation. Maybe it's trying to wash the mud off itself. Or maybe it's just its limbs are a bit stiff. I really don't know. I'm going to go investigate. Probably going to give it a bit of a fright though. It's probably going to pop under the surface of the water. Robert, I like that. Maybe it's just celebrating. Maybe it's just celebrating that there's water and having a jolly good time. I think it's trying to go out of the water, but it can't. I don't know why. What an odd terrapin. What are you doing, terrapin? Swim, 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 swim. It's got the most peculiar technique of any terrapin I've ever seen. That is very cool. Judy says, was it Judy or Julie? I couldn't hear Emma there. That would explain a lot. That would be exactly what this terrapin's problem is. Apparently they get air pockets in their shells, which causes problems when they're trying to submerge. That would provide the best explanation possible, because it means that this terrapin, when it saw us coming, was trying to submerge itself, and it can't because it's wearing a life jacket, essentially. It's got armbands on, one of those rings, those pool rings.
Got a fly on its shed now. There's a fly sitting on it.
There's a fly sitting on it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. What an amazing view. This is why I love bushwalk. Actually, this is why I love presenting live wildlife, is because you get to see things you never would have noticed. I think that's exactly what it is. I think that's an air bubble. Now, how does the terrapin get rid of it? And imagine how weird it must feel. No, wait, how does that work? Their skin's connected to their shell. How do they get... I have so many thoughts on this. The shell is part of them. How do they get an air bubble? Where does the air bubble come in? What does the air bubble feel like when it comes out? Does it feel like some sort of really bizarre form of flatulence? I have so many questions. I don't understand. Kremlin says it's just unbalanced. It is. I am so... It's fascinating. I wonder what the other terrapins think of it. Oh, shame, this poor thing. That must be it, though. I mean, it's really struggling to sink. It's struggling to get its shell underwater. That's exactly what its problem is. Because there are other terrapins in here, but they've submerged and all that's sticking out is their heads. And that's the way that they hide. But he can't, because he's got a buoyant shell. Oh, shame. Shouldn't really be laughing. It's a bit funny. It's exactly the opposite to my brother. Now, I don't think Angus is so good at laughing at himself. I don't think he'll be terribly insulted by this. South Africans are taught to swim very early in life because it's quite a warm country. And some take to it naturally and some do not. And my brother is probably the least natural swimmer on the planet. And he, for most of his life, and as far as I know, continues to this day, he swam vertically, with his head above the surface of the water and his body dangling somewhere below him. He never managed to change his style of swimming. Shame. Poor Angus. Got a broken ankle at the moment because he got hit by a taxi. He has not had the greatest fortunes this last week. The good news is that he has a fantastic sense of humour, so he won't mind us laughing at him. Right. Now, what we really need is a marine biologist who knows turtles really well and their relatives to explain this all to us. Fortunately, we happen to have one available.
Yes, we do have a marine biologist. I have swapped places with Trishala, and down here we do have a speaked hinged tortoise. I have had a little bit of issue pronouncing that word, but I'm going to stick with tortoise. So this is a great find. He's just kicking his head out a little bit. Yes. Oh, I'll stop moving so I don't make his head go in. And of course, these are the relatives of turtles, and I do happen to be a bit of a fan and expert on turtles. So what we're looking at here is the carapace of the shell. So that's just the top part of the shell. And in this tortoise, it's much flatter in comparison to the leopard tortoise. So that's a great identification feature when you're looking between the two. And it's also smaller. So we spotted this on the road. And unfortunately, very often they are on the road and possibly do get crushed under the cars. So if we take a closer look at the carapace, it's actually made up of something we call scutes. And scutes are made up of keratin, the exact same material that we have in our hair and fingernails. So believe it or not, it's really, really, really tough. And each layer and layer and layer of keratin builds up to produce this shell. Now the bottom part of the shell is called the plastron, the part that we cannot see right now. And the plastron is a great indicator between male and female. The males will have a curved plastron, the females will be flat. Now we're not going to touch this little guy that I'm not sure what sex it is right now, because they can get a fright and they can end up releasing all the water that they've stored up inside a special little sac inside of them that they save for preventing dehydration, if you like. And they can also use it to moisten soils if they need to lay eggs. So we don't want that to happen. So we're not going to touch this little guy. I just want to try and have a look if they can see a tail. A tail is also a great feature in identifying between male and females. The males will always have a bigger and longer tail. And I can't see one. So it is a potential that it could be female, but I definitely could not say for sure. Now this one I could probably pick up in my hand just to give you a size estimation. It's very small, definitely nowhere near as big as the leopard tortoise. Now in this Speaks hinge, they have a special hinge at the back. And I'm not sure if you're going to be able to get a good look at it, but they're able to actually close this hinge and protect their rear end from predators. So that's where the name actually comes from for these little guys. And it keeps poking its head in and out. Now turtles in the ocean are not actually able to do that. It's only tortoises that can bring their head in and out of the shell. And fascinatingly enough, the shell is actually infused as part of their body. So they can't just leave their shell and abandon it and go and get a new one. It is part of them. So the top part of the shell is actually their, if you like, a fused rib cage. So if you were to touch this animal, it wouldn't necessarily be painful, but they would definitely feel it. It's got a nerve supply and a blood supply. So this is another reason we shouldn't really touch these little guys. So as many of you know, the rains poured down last night. We had a downfall of water. So this is also another reason that we're going to see a lot more of these animals out and about now. They've woken up from their estivation. It's now wet, so hopefully we will see more and more tortoises around the area. Okay, it's on the move. So you can see that they actually has feet. Can we get a closer look at the feet and little claws? Now this is another difference between turtles. Turtles have flippers, obviously, for swimming in the ocean. They have little feet that actually have quite sharp claws for walking and digging. Look at that. And of course their body parts are protected in scales. That's another unique feature of reptiles.
Linda would like to know what they eat. Linda. Linda wants to know what they eat. Linda.
Linda wants to know what they eat.
Yes.
These ones, Linda, that's a great question. Sorry, I'm not plugged in, so my translator, James, just gave me the question. They have quite a varied diet, and they're quite well known for eating millipedes, would you believe it, and even land snails. So, yes, they have quite a varied diet, but they are their special, unique favourites. He knows I'm here, so he's not sure whether to move or not right now. Hey, little guy. I just love seeing them here. It's like the turtles of the land. So I'm going to hop back in the car now, just so I can actually hear what is going on. Excuse moi. So, now that I'm back in the car, after that lovely little tortoise, we're going to head over to Tristan and see what he has up in the Mara.
Nice to hear that there's all the animals that come out in the rain are out and about on Juma this morning. So from things like little tortoises and millipedes and snails, it's all happening that side. Now, we're with a herd of ellies, and we've seen a lot of ellies this morning. Obviously, we've stopped and we've discussed them quite at length at various points, but it's never a bad thing to stop for another herd of ellies, particularly when there's a tiny little baby that has been, well, quite boisterous is probably the word for it. It keeps shaking its head all over the place, trunk going all over the... Oh, no, you guys are going to stop behind a bush. Are you really? Hold on, James. Let's go forward a little bit. So they keep avoiding where we are and kind of going behind a bush. So this should be better if we stop here somewhere. This will work. There we go. Now you can see the little one. It's got its little trunk up and it's sniffing us. It's as if to say, who are you guys? I want to know. I want to figure it out. And it's not a tiny, tiny, tiny little baby, but it is quite small. You can see it's kind of hidden by that big female. Isn't that cute? It is always a good idea to stop for a baby ellie. There's something about them, particularly when there's ones that have got lots of energy like this one. Very, very, very cute. You can see it crossing the road, and trunk is all over the place. Still mastering the art of how to actually control this trunk effectively, and so there's lots of movement all over the place, and it kind of just flops everywhere. You can see it tries to mimic every now and then and grab things, and that's how they learn, is eventually they'll get it right by kind of doing it. Now this poor Topi that's ahead of them has just been chased from its sleeping spot. I'm sorry, Topi. It's not ideal. It got chased. Now, warthogs are going to be next. They're at front left of the ellies. I wonder if they're also going to get pushed on by the elephants. You'll see them just in front there. They might get chased away too. As ellies are mobile, they generally give them a hard time. But let's see. There we go. Warthogs are scattering on both directions, parting ways for the ellies to come through. And look at this little one. Yes, you are a big elephant. We can see that. Poor warthogs. Probably wouldn't be too scared of that little baby ellie, but it's the fact that there's two massive females with them that means that this little baby ellie can push its weight around and flare its ears and shake its trunk and do all of those kind of things to try and intimidate those warthogs. But those are two beautiful, beautiful females that are accompanying that baby as well. All of a sudden stop now to feed. There we go. Very cool. Good. That was very nice. Like I say, it's always good just to stop when there's a few little babies around. It's nice to kind of see the little ones sort of cruising about and seeing their little boisterous nature. Particularly early in the morning, they tend to have a lot more kind of energy than they do often in the afternoons when it's been quite hot for quite a while. So Barbie, very sassy, you're right. It's got lots of attitude, this little one. I suppose, like I say, who can blame it? It's got two massive kind of guardians on either side, and so it can lead the charge from the middle and make sure that it's full of nonsense, and no one's really going to do anything about it, is it? So I suppose that's why it can have that little attitude, but it certainly is full of the joy of life this morning. This little one has been charging around all over the place. Good, let's carry on. They're starting to disappear off into the forest sections. Now, the reason we also came this way, and I'm pretty sure those cars that we all saw, well, that we saw just now, James and I were discussing it, is probably in all likelihood for the rhinos. The rhinos often spend a lot of time where we are now, so I would imagine maybe there was one that was just drifting from the open clearing into the forest thicket for the day, so that's maybe why the cars had all stopped there. It's a place where I've seen rhinos quite regularly, so I'd imagine that's what it was all about, because there's no cars really built up anymore. Mohammed, there's always a chance of a cheetah sighting in the Mara. You can never write it off. So far, though, we haven't heard of anything. No one has kind of come past us and told us anything or seen anything. And we'd have to probably head quite far to the south to have a really good chance of seeing cheetah. Kenya, Narratoy, Naserian, they like to spend their time more down towards the Tanzanian boundary. So that would be a better place to go and look for them. We're quite far north at the moment. But in saying that, you never know. There was that young male that arrived the other day that Steve had, and Naserian has been seen all the way up towards Olololo Gate, as well as I think even Musiara's made a turn past Olololo Gate area before as well. So there's always a chance. You can never write off a cheetah sighting. They can appear anywhere, but so far we haven't heard anything so far. Now I'm going to keep going, keep seeing if I can maybe scrounge out a rhino somewhere here. While I do that though, let's send you back across to Jamie. Hopefully she's not still walking like a warthog, and hopefully she has something interesting to show you.
I'm definitely not walking like a warthog anymore, and in fact you'll be hard-pressed to convince me to do that again in a hurry. It was uncomfortable, and now it's hot. So, what we are looking at, I think most of you know. I think we have taught you well enough on these long bushwalk mornings as to what this is. Now, each and every single bird species has a different approach to nesting. Of course, some are similar. Some will approach it with a sort of a platform nest of the raptors, relying on their own strength and the height of the nest to protect them. But when you're a blue waxbill, which doesn't have quite the same level of intimidation as, say, a martial eagle, well, you have to take a different approach to protecting your eggs for two reasons. One, there are predators around, and two, cuckoos. Cuckoos like to parasitize waxbills. So what they do is they pick the thorniest, nastiest tree they can possibly find. Usually buffalo thorns, but sometimes knob thorns, or in this case blackthorn. And that is where they build their nests. Tucked away, and it looks completely, well, I would say completely messy, but there is actually a beautiful design to it, and although you can't really see it, there is a chamber right in the center. Can you get it there, Seb?
Yeah.
Is it the oriole?
Yeah.
Oh, just took off, and now I'm hooked. You got it. Sorry, I'm trapped. I'm trapped. I hooked myself, yeah. Now, there we go. So, essentially, if you really wanted to get to this nest, you could do it, but you'd have to be desperate. Seb, would you put your hand in there?
No, not even the camera.
Not even the camera. I also wouldn't. What is Impala doing?
Lots of tunnels in there. Yeah, I got it.
Impala are just sprinting. I'm not sure that they're not going through that weird rut. I think it might be males. It's not a rut. It's the pregnant females giving off all the wrong hormones and the males getting, well, all the wrong ideas. Just hold on a sec. I'm taking my earpiece out. They're not alarm calling. What are they? Let's just go see what Herbie thinks. Okay, end of blue waxbill. Blue waxbill, thorns, things don't like to eat it. There you go, done, sorted. I missed the nuances of the sounds of the impala because I had my earpiece in. I couldn't hear if it was rutting or alarm calls. Where's Herbie gone? Herbie's abandoned us. He's gone running for the leopard. We're going to go see if we can find him and the source of the impala's disturbance. Let's go across to Brent.
Welcome back. So the lion tracks appeared out of magic again, and they're somewhere in this western area of Torchwood. So we've been doing a few loops through here. I think there's a good chance we will find them this afternoon. I think they've gone flat now, and there's another vehicle. The guys have got their trackers out on foot. So we've just done a loop around to make sure they haven't come out the side, which they have not thus far. Let's have a quick look from here. It's been quite confusing because they've actually gone in a few loops around, but I'm pretty sure they're around here somewhere in Gormas. Carol says they sound like confused lions. Well, what's probably happened is, Carol, they were hunting, and that's why they haven't sort of stuck to a single direction, and they've looped around and zigzagged. So as it gets warmer, of course, they're less likely to be moving, so our chances of finding them increases. Let's have a look. It's double checking that they haven't managed to sneak across Cheetah Cut Line on a hard patch of sand and headed towards Drakensberg. So we're going to have a quick check down here at this big junction. But so far, it looks like they probably are still in Torchwood. As I said, there are guys on foot on the tracks, so we're waiting to hear from them. Okay, so this is the big junction I wanted to check carefully for tracks, so I'm going to do that. In the meantime, we're going to send you across to Tristan to see where he's off to and what he's up to next. Hopefully he finds...
Well, Brenty, good luck. Hopefully you get it right, and hopefully you'll find what you're looking for. But as you can see, we have stopped because we have a roadblock, and that is in the form of, well, Africa's tallest creature. It is walking ahead of us, and so this big bull giraffe is kind of moving along and staring off into the distance, but I don't know what it's staring at, because there's impalas and warthogs in front that don't look in any way perturbed by anything, as well as another giraffe, and so I don't think there's any sort of sign of a predator, but you can see it's stopping and got its ears flared out as though it's really quite alert to what's going on, but there's, I don't think, any sign of anything there. Let's go a little bit further forward and just check what's around that bend, because it also looks like there might be a few baboons in that area too. Is there baboons there below where that giraffe is? Yes, there's baboons as well, so I doubt there's any sort of worry for this giraffe, but it's being very cautious as it's going along. Once again, multiple animals all together. It's amazing, this marsh, how many animals actually spend time together. So there's lots of zebras and, you know, various other animals that are here, and so it's like a big party, really. I'm not surprised that we heard booming roars coming from here. If I was a lion, I think I'd spend some time around this area too. There'd be lots and lots of options for food. So, Giraffe Girl, well, this is a surprise. I am very shocked that you have just made this statement, that you say that this is your favorite kind of traffic jam, as is having a giraffe in front of you. Given that your handle is Giraffe Girl, I'm very shocked by this statement, and I'm surprised that you would say something like that. But anyway, we'll just have to go with it and have to run with the fact that you are a giraffe fan and that this is your favorite kind of giraffe. stop is when there is a giraffe in front. Now, he's still kind of slowly going. I don't know why he's... Yeah, exactly, Emma, we're all shocked. We all can't believe the fact that Giraffe Girl is happy that there's a giraffe. It would be very shocking to have... Anyway, this giraffe is kind of just still sort of watching very carefully as to what's going on. I think it's peering at all the other giraffe that are in the distance and wondering if maybe there's another male there that it needs to be worried about. I don't know, because there are a lot of giraffe in the distance, and when I say a lot, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and looks like maybe 9 of them that are around quite far off in between those trees there. There's a car you'll see, and then you'll see a whole bunch of giraffe heads sticking out. So he's kind of watching those guys, and I wonder if maybe there's another big male there that he's a little bit kind of concerned about, and that's why he's moving so slowly towards that area. It's strange, though. Normally a giraffe, if it sees other animals, is not really too worried, unless, of course, there's a predator, and then you'll find that they're far more sort of wary and cautious about the way that they walk. But he's being very sort of alert as he approaches through past that sort of area. Now you'll see the baboons, they're also milling about as normal, catching some sun as well. It's I suppose been a fairly chilly start to our day. When we first kind of got up, there was a bit of a cold wind, and now that there's a bit of sunshine, I imagine these guys are quite happy just to be sitting out in the sun and warming up a little bit and feeling much better about life. Right, let's just go forward a bit again, James. We'll just try and catch up with all of these guys. Little Owl, my favorite herbivore in the Mara, is without doubt the elands. So we saw some this morning, but they were so far off that it wasn't really easy to put them on camera. But eland would be my favorite. I like them because they're just such big animals. I think they're astoundingly big. They're much bigger than even something like a buffalo. They weigh more than a buffalo too, a big male. So I really do like spending time with them, and also because we don't get to see too much of them where we're from. In the Sabi Sands we see very little, so always nice to spend a lot of time with them out here in the Mara. Now I'm going to leave our male here for now and go past the baboons, because I just want to catch up with all these giraffe, because it's quite pretty to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 of them together. So we're going to go and have a little look at them now. We'll wait for the baboons to cross the road, right? After you guys. Yes, thank you. It is a lot of giraffe, Emma. It is very, very, very many giraffe. The most I've seen in the Mara was 27 together, which is a lot. I saw a photograph the other day, funny enough, from Serengeti, of somebody that had seen... What was it? We counted in the photograph. It's a kind of panoramic stitch, and it's like 112 giraffe together, or something stupid like that. It's crazy. So it's just this whole kind of panoramic scene of just giraffe everywhere. So East Africa, you often get much bigger clumps of giraffe than what you would see in South Africa. Although in South Africa, I've also seen big herds in central parts of the Sabi Sands. I saw a herd of 17 there together, which was quite nice, but we don't see it too much on Djuma. We know giraffe and Djuma are few and far between. Now we're just going to pass this car before we stop with all our giraffes that are around here. They are very kindly pulling off the road for us, which is always very, very nice that they're able to kind of do that and allow us to kind of pass through. Good morning, everybody. Right, there we go. Now that we've got car out the way, we can actually stop and admire all of the lanky creatures that are in front of us. Isn't this cool? It is a lot of giraffe. There is a serious amount all over the place, and you can see they kind of all sort of milling about and watching. They've just come out of the forest. I'd imagine they must have just been feeding there this morning, and now they're just kind of milling about on the open plains, and they'll go from sort of area for treed area to treed area looking for food, and along the way they'll feed off all the new little plants that are growing. And so you'll find these guys will eat any small little acacias or any of those small little trees that are growing that are tasty. They'll kind of feed off those as they go. So sometimes it'll look like they're almost grazing because they'll bend down so low, but that's just little trees that are kind of starting to sprout and come through. And so you'll find that they do that. And isn't that very cool though? I think it's amazing when you get this many giraffe together. I think it's a very cool scene to see. And you can see how easily they are able to spot one another by just the backs of their ears. So if you imagine in the forest where it's quite dark, their coloration in their coats would actually blend in quite well, but those ears are very white, and they are a clear sort of signal to one another that they can kind of see each other and be able to then follow one another through on a safe course of passage. So it's their kind of following mechanism is those white ears, as opposed to the sort of dark ears of a lion, or the ring of a waterbuck or something like that. These guys just have the big white ears that helps to be able to see where one another is. Giraffe girl, oh goodness, you've gotten so excited you can't type. Well, I'm glad that you're so excited that you can't type. It's a wonderful thing to be able to see that many animals that you get that excited, and I'm glad that we have managed to show your favorite animal today. When was the last time you saw a giraffe in Djuma, or even Namara? When did we last stop for giraffe? I'd imagine there's lots of giraffe here, so we should have seen quite a few in the last few kind of days. But anyway, this particular male is quite interesting actually. When it turned there, its face is quite dark, isn't it? It's got this sort of dark sort of band along its nose area, which is quite pretty actually. It's quite a striking looking fellow. You're going to be a ladies' man when you're a little bit older. You're still very young, so you're not going to be doing anything with any ladies yet, but as time goes on, you, I think, will be quite popular if you've got a nice dark face like that. What I want to do is I want to actually try and get around these giraffe just now, so we can have them all walking towards us, because that'll be quite nice, I think, if they all kind of milled straight towards us and we get this sort of oncoming of many giraffe all walking down the road towards us. Because they're on a little path that's going to take them towards the road, I think some of them might actually be on the road already. But let's see, maybe we can get lucky here and get round them and see if we can get them walking towards us. I have to do a bit of creative driving, I think, to get round and in front of them and then turned in time for them to kind of walk towards us, which we shall try. We shall endeavor to do so. I can't believe this area that I am now was completely underwater when I was last here. You couldn't drive here at all. In fact, the water was pretty much where I am now. So amazing that it's all dry compared to what it used to look like. Just across the rocks. Bumping our way through. There we go. Oh no, they're all over the road. That's the problem. I was hoping they were still just off to the side. We would have been able to see all of them kind of walking towards us if I went through, but I'll have to stop here because otherwise I'm going to end up chasing them, and we don't want to chase any of you lovely ladies, because these are mostly ladies in front, so we wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of the girls. It's always a good life lesson, so any young men that are watching out there, remember, stay on the right side of the ladies, otherwise it's going to be a tough life for you. It's always better to be to be able to keep the women on your good side. Yes, exactly. So Emma agrees with me, and I'm pretty sure that Jamie Patterson would also agree that it is better to keep ladies on your good side, and so why don't we go and find out exactly how she thinks about it.
It's always a good idea to keep ladies on your good side, Tris. It's also a good idea to keep the gentlemen on your good side. In fact, you should keep everyone on your good side because, well, it's just counterproductive otherwise. Look, it's a millipede. Much larger than the one that we saw earlier. So to give you a sense of scale... Hi, buddy. I'm very sorry. Would you walk very gently onto my hand? He's eating my finger! He's chewing my finger! No way! That's the first time that's ever happened. He chewed my finger. That was the weirdest feeling. Oh, it was so gentle. Usually they just sort of climb onto you, so I just wanted to give you a sort of a sense of scale, but he tried to chew my finger. That's really weird. It was such a weird feeling. It was...
Not sore?
No, not at all. But clearly a chew, not legs, if that makes sense. He's doing it again! He's doing it again! Tickles! That is weird. I've never experienced that before. I was just trying to give you a sense of scale. I'm not disturbing him, otherwise I'd stop. It feels so pick him up. I just wanted to let him crawl onto my hand. I don't really want to pick him up, but I want to try and see, look at his mandibles. They're not meat eaters. They're not fearsome carnivores. It's such a weird feeling. They're not technically carnivores. They eat meat. I mean, they don't eat meat. They eat fingers. No, they eat plant material. That's what I'm trying to say. It's their centipede cousins that eat meat. Just the strangest feeling. If you put your fingernails together and sort of pinched your skin ever so slightly, that's what it felt like, but not sore. Just weird. I've never ever had one chew on my finger before. And I can tell you that I grew up with millipedes around. I picked them up constantly. Can you see his jaw there?
Kind of, yeah. He's surrounded by ants.
He is surrounded by ants. Huh. What a strange experience that was. The world's most aggressive millipede. I'd also be angry if I was walking through an ant's nest, I gotta say. They're probably cleaning him. Huh. A weird experience. I've never been chewed on by a millipede. Brent, who has done everything and seen everything, well, perhaps he has in his life before this. What? I'm trying to say.
I have not been chewed on by a millipede, but I am rushing to try get you guys a last-minute leopard. I wonder which leopard. I wonder if you can guess which leopard I'm going to. I can give you one clue. It is not Hosanna, but it is a male. I have to drive quickly to get there before the end of show. So apologies for not looking at you guys, and I've got to concentrate on driving with a little bit of speed. Are we going to make it? Is it really truly going to be a literal last 1 minute leopard? But while I rush towards the last minute leopard, let's send you across to Tristan and his giraffe all the way back in the Masai Mara. That's a bump.
Well, good luck, Brenty. I hope that you find your last-minute leopard. I'm intrigued to find out who the last-minute leopard is, whether is Thandi, or is it Klalamba, or is it Tingana. You never know. Maybe even Quarantine, if Brenty's been on Tortured. You never know who it could be, but I'm hoping that it will be a nice sighting, whoever it is. And interesting enough, talking about Thandi, oh, hello, fish eagles. They're coming in from the left-hand side above the giraffe. You should see them coming to frame. There they are on top. So that's the fish eagles that we're calling just now. But it's interesting. I was looking at the picture of Thandi yesterday and the last sighting before that, and I have a sneaky suspicion that there's something going on with Thandi, that she is potentially, I'm going to say it, but it's going to cause a bit of a stir, but I have a funny feeling that she might be pregnant. Her stomach does not look like that of a leopard that is not. She's thin around her hips, but she's got this bulge in her tummy that hasn't gone away from both sightings, and she's definitely not full. It's not in the right place, so I wonder if she doesn't have a sneaky little one inside there, which would be interesting because no one has saw her mate, and so that would make a very kind of interesting situation. Now, Emma's saying that I've caused pandemonium and that I've broken the chat, but I suspect that I would like Brent to see her because I trust Brent's opinion on this explicitly. We discussed it when we were on leave, Brent and I, because the one sighting was while we were on leave, and Brent, myself, and Jamie and Ali had a discussion. And for me, it looks like she might be. I mean, I might be wrong, but there's definitely a swell in a place where cubs kind of develop, and the fact that she's got these kind of skinny parts around her hips and that she's not full, but yet there's still this swell. It looks very much like when she was pregnant with Klalamba, when she just had the one inside. She had that same sort of little swell. Right. Now, anyway, that's the discussion that we're going to have. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of opinions on it, but we'll have to see. I haven't seen her, so I wouldn't know, but just from the pictures it looks like it might be. Anyhow, it's the way it goes, and I wonder if maybe, just maybe, we might get a little surprise cub. Wouldn't that be a nice little Christmas present, as a surprise cub? If she is pregnant, though, I would imagine that it would be not that far along, so she may be, I would say, 2.5 months, so she's not ready yet to give birth, but it'll be interesting. If we see her in a week or two's time and it's still swollen like that, then it would be a good indication that she is around. Right, now it sounds like Brent has come right with his leopard and has managed to find it, and that it is a boy, so let's go find out who exactly it is.
Indeed, a last-minute leopard, well, a last-second leopard. It is Hukamori. I have not seen for quite a while. He was back just on the edge of Djuma on the southern boundary, and not too far away from where Hassana was seen this morning. So Hassana better watch out, because the hook is in town. Probably not going to move too far. It's quite hot. He looks like he's not very full, but he's definitely eaten something. I think he's probably going to find a nice shady spot to have a snooze. Where are you off to, Hook? Don't go back that way. That's a bad way. That's out of our traverse. Well, bye-bye, Hook. He just came in for a quick visit right on the boundary, and now it looks like he's heading back towards the south. And who knows, maybe he will stop. I'm just going to have to try and move a little bit. Maybe he will come back this afternoon. Maybe he's just looking for a shady spot. And for the last few seconds, you can see Hukamori doing his business.